All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about game development, just like every time. We got a couple great friends in here. We're going to talk. I don't know. I'm just going to say hello and introduce everybody real quick. I got Charles here from Infallible Code. Go check out his channel. Jason Story, who is going to start his channel sometime soon. I've been bugging him about it every day. And my buddy Salim, who's been a game developer, game designer for decades. Working at AAA studios and one of my closest friends. So, yeah, welcome everybody, and welcome everybody that's coming to hang out. Well, I don't have many friends, Salim. So.
I instantly go up to greatest because you have like one friend. Yeah.
Yes, you are my number one friend. I'm still looking for number two. Openings are available. Oh man. No, it's good having everybody here though, and hopefully everybody in chat can hear us and everything's going good. I don't think we had any real specific things to talk about today. I just want to talk about game design, game development a little bit. I did do a little bit of game design stuff yesterday, so I thought maybe I could jump in and share some of that too, and get Salim to tear apart my amazing game design. Or whatever kind of stuff you guys want to talk about, or if people just have questions about game development and what it's like to be a game designer, programmer, or an artist. I mean, you're a game designer, so you make lots of beautiful art, as my wife would say. I still remember, like, I haven't told you guys, so Charles and Jason don't know about this, but my wife, like, for the first maybe 6 or 7 years of knowing Salim, like, I know Salim, we'd hang out all the time. She was convinced that he was an artist because he was a game designer and he didn't write code. So she thought, well, he must do art. Like, why can't Salim draw? And she was getting really irritated. Salim wouldn't draw things for her. Like, how does he not?
I can show you some of my drawings. I certainly do not qualify as an artist. That's for sure.
I tried to explain multiple times what game designers do, since it's not art and code, which is just like play video games.
That's why you've done. That's why literally your last video is like an hour and a half explaining what each job in.
I mean, my art is like blocks and stuff in a diagram in a game design doc. That's about the best I can do, is make a square and a circle with a smiley face. I'm not making anything else.
Wow. Well, by the way, I was just really quiet right now because I had shared the wrong stream link. So if anyone if anyone has joined into my stream, thank you. Please make sure that you share that stream link. If anyone is confused, appreciate it. And Jason Story, your mic is a little low. Getting reported.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna dial it in here. So let me know if that's any better.
Oh, you sound good now.
That's good. That sounds good.
Sounds quite a bit better. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Hey, there was a question for Salim. Oh wait, why is it not showing up in here? They're asking how can they make their game fun to play?
That's easy.
2 sentences or less. 2 sentences or less.
Fun is super subjective, but I don't know. You gotta. That's tough to whatever your design is. You gotta define what it is, break it down to its core component, and then, execute on that. Finding fun in the game, whatever you were inspired by, if it's fun to you, then you're probably getting close to it. But yeah, it's really difficult to answer a general question like that. Really just iterate, have some other people play it, and whatever, you watch people play it, whatever, like, opens up their eyes, makes them smile or whatever, like, take note of that, and whatever, makes them upset or angry, then take note of that. Seems it's pretty straightforward. But fun is like a super subjective thing. I actually have some coworkers that get on me all the time because I'm like, let's just make it fun. And most of the time I'm being facetious because we're like in design and stuff like that. And I just kind of throw that out there, but it's not easy to make something fun. But it's such a generic thing. You just making a good game isn't easy. But I don't know, throw some ideas out, talk to other people. We call it rubber ducking. Grab somebody who doesn't really know games very well, or doesn't play them a bunch, just throw some ideas at them, and maybe something will fall out of that. But yeah, I don't know, just keep playing, iterating, just throwing new ideas in, stuff like that. Somebody, I'm rambling now.
Yeah. And I like to have just people play it too. Get feedback from just
Playing
other people constantly. Charles, you had something, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, it reminds me of something that Jason S says a lot. Jason's story that when you're working on a game, you want to try to find the fun as fast as possible. I think if you're working on your own game, obviously, certain genres lend themselves to different audiences. Like I don't like first-person shooters. So if I were to develop a first-person shooter, I really might not be the best to tell if it's fun or not. Or maybe I would be the best because I'd play it and I'd have a sort of unique perspective. But essentially, whatever you're developing, whether it be a survival game or a first-person shooter, I think you can definitely key off existing games, as artists, it's okay to steal, so to speak, things that work and implement them into your own games. And then, what Salim was saying was you want to iterate and you want to make sure you get other people in front of it because, ultimately you're going to be biased. And so you want to be able to get as many people in front of it as possible to find out, is it really fun?
But you also bring up a good point.
No,
yeah,
sorry,
go ahead. You also bring up a good point about uniqueness of you're not a first-person shooter player, but you want to try and make a first-person shooter game. And so you might bring in a kooky idea because you're thinking about it from a different point of view. And then, bam, you got something new and original. I just wanted to bring up. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off, Jason.
No, it's fine. I was just going to say that. So that's that. I understand there's two parts of this problem too. Is that there's one thing of how do you make it fun if you have a mechanic, but the first half might be I can't even figure out how to make it fun. So if you're having trouble from the start of how do I even come up with what I'm doing, the general rule is there's a term called possibility space, and it's how much freedom does the player have to solve a problem. And there's a great video that's just recently been released by Thousand Ant on that channel, where he talks about system thinking and system design. And if you combine that idea with just general prototyping and sort of possibility space, the idea is make yourself some system or mechanic, a gun that does something, and then have another system like you could plant trees or whatever it is, and ask yourself, can you have those two systems work together? Does the trees grow bullets? Can you shoot the tree to grow it or heal it or whatever? And you may not know what the game is yet, but if you give yourself the most amount of systemic connections and possibility space for how a player can solve a problem, then you can find out what the most fun is. Same with platforming. If you have multiple platforms, can you only jump up them, or can you do something else? Is there another way to solve that problem? And the more ways you can solve a problem, the more possibilities for the player to figure out what's fun to them. Doom being a great example. Doom, in any fight, there's not kill this guy, then this guy, then this guy. You actually have to look at the problem and go, I have to solve it using a combination of methods. I can use whatever weapons I have. I have to constantly be looking at the possibility space available to me. So if you don't know the answer to how it's fun, start by just making possibilities that can find out what the fun is, and then refine it, and then give your game an identity once you know what you're actually aiming for.
What's great about that approach too is I read this book recently and it was talking about emergent design. And what's great is if you have a couple of separate systems, you increase the possibility space of your game, and probably players will find ways to play it, beat it, enjoy it in ways that maybe you didn't even imagine. And I think the concept of possibility space is really cool because, if you develop different systems, and it really lends itself to something that our channels are all about is clean code. If you write your code in a way that's disjointed and you design on top of that your game in a way that's disjointed, then all these disjointed parts can join up and create this emergent game design that you maybe hadn't even planned for, which is really cool.
And I mean, that's the core of a sandbox game, right? You just make a world that has a bunch of stuff in it, bullet trees, for example, which Jason, we want to make a bullet tree game. You just have a sandbox that just has a bunch of stuff and you throw players in it. You look at stuff like Minecraft, stuff like that. It is literally just here's blocks to build stuff. Here you go. That's the starting point. This is what the game is. Okay, let's throw some enemies in here. Let's throw some general normal gameplay stuff, and then just give it to the world and see what they make. And bam, you have a worldwide phenomenon that has spawned multiple copies and people trying to recreate what was sparked there. So yeah, the possibility space thing, effectively is literally just make a sandbox. You start with like you were saying, Jason, start with one mechanic. This is what my game is. My game is once again throwing bullets off of trees, and then finding some way to make that super cool. Which that's also the fun in game design is coming up with something goofy, and then the challenge of making that fun to get back to the fun point. Like I now have bullet, man. I can't get off these bullet trees. It's super awesome.
I just made that up.
That's brilliant. Write that down.
Now they got to come out of the ground, and do they use the bullets to shoot, or do they shoot leaves? Like okay, all kinds of goofy stuff. But yeah, so like what you guys are talking about, definitely, it's like I just think about, hey, big sandbox, throw some stuff in, games like Ark and also the crazy stuff that just or even Breath of the Wild. Look at for any Zelda fan, you look at the evolution of Legend of Zelda, and then you look at Breath of the Wild, which is we just took this core awesome IP and bam, sandbox, and it's one of the greatest games ever made.
Yeah, I was going to say that Breath of the Wild really did it well. I mean, there's so many systems in that game, like temperature, wind, working with the fire, like just great. And what's cool about that, this is sort of like meta, talking like on a meta level, but if you can produce a game that has like a really big possibility space, then you kind of get some like ingrained marketing because inevitably community members will post videos and GIFs on subreddits. Like I'm on the Valheim subreddit, and I'm always on there looking at what these people are creating, and I know that the developers are probably looking at those GIFs like, wow, we did not imagine someone was going to make a giant roller coaster and put a Viking boat down it. So that's definitely really cool too.
I would say, though, I kind of want to counter that idea just to make sure that we don't lean too heavily on this. There's a problem with bloat for a game as well. So keep in mind, we're talking about this whole prototyping, finding the fun portion of it. But once you find the fun, stop. Because a lot of people, what they'll do is they think that they can just throw more mechanics in. If it's fun now, more mechanics means more fun.
Oh, yeah.
What happens is you lose the identity of the game. You have to have a game loop in your head. What is the actual point of the experience? What is the minute gameplay? And you want to keep that as a tight loop. And all the systems should feed into that, not detract from it.
Yes, you are like reading my mind. Outside of like sandbox stuff, but I don't say like the contrast of that is the really tight storytelling game like Ghost of Tsushima or God of War, stuff like that, where there is no open world or open capability. The games like Uncharted series, things like that, where they just want to tell a really tight story, have really tight game mechanics. The game is focused on what it is. When a game knows its identity and a developer executes on that, you think about From Software, you think about Dark Souls series. It's all a very tight, very well done gameplay experience. And the key words that you said there, moment to moment, like that. There's some people can kind of get you can't see the forest for the trees, for lack of a better way to say it. They get this cool thing. Okay, we nailed this. All right, cool. We got more money. We got whatever. We got more staff. Whatever. Let's now forget about this cool thing that we came up with and start adding all this other extra stuff. And it just kind of blurs what it is. But you get moment to moment. You look at a game like Destiny 2. Destiny 2, Bungie knows how to make a tight, moment to moment first person experience, regardless of all the hoopla and bad decisions that people think that they've made with their design. When you play the game moment to moment, it's fantastic. It's just fun. Most of the, guns feel really good. Shooting enemies is super exciting. You get a headshot on something, its head blows up, stuff like, oh man, I want to keep doing this. I want to do this like 5 billion times because I have to because it's a grindy game, but that's just the nature of the game. But one thing that you never lose sight of, one thing that you don't end up not enjoying is their moment to moment. All the other stuff that happens outside of that may make you leave the game, but when you come back to it and you just go and shoot something, it's like, oh man, like this is fun. It feels good. So yeah, that moment to moment is a huge part of the game, and that's what once you nail that, just don't get too excited and start adding a bunch of crazy stuff like Jason was saying.
I feel like I have experienced that with Valheim firsthand. I love that game. I've been playing it nonstop, and it's buggy. For me, it crashes. Like if I ever go out into the ocean and there's a lot of particle effects, I think is what it is. It crashes, but I'm immediately going back in. I play on a server my friend hosts, and they don't even have the feature of being able to pre-save servers or even point a host name. So I literally have to type in the full IP, port number.
Oh wow, old school.
And then a password. But every time it crashes, I do it because I love it. It's just so fun moment to moment. And I was like, I think that is like a great testament to how good that game is. And the game does not have any feature creep. It's got like the right amount of features. So definitely.
You'll find a lot of games do this through just raw locomotion. Mario is a great example. I mean, obviously Mario games are great fun in general, but if you just take Mario and put him in a room with just a bunch of raised platforms, a lot of people could spend at least 40 minutes just jumping around, doing literally nothing, because they realize the loop is movement. The entire point of all Mario games is you're moving around. And so they took that one concept and said, and this is what I mean when I'm saying possibility space. It doesn't mean like infinite new paths and routes and things. It means at any one moment as a player, I can jump, I can backflip, I can climb a ledge, I can drop off a ledge, I can crawl, my decision, do I want to like jump off this wall and then climb up that way? Do I want to triple jump onto something? Do I want to backflip onto it? It's letting me decide how to engage with the problem ahead of me. So I just want to make sure that a lot of people might hear possibility space and think that means lots more stuff to do. It doesn't. It means take a single concept. And there's Mark Brown did a really good video on this about one button games, where I think he called it versatile verbs or something, but effectively you have one button and that button has lots of context for how it works, and so you can have a single thing and branch it out in a lot of ways. Great example of this is Hollow Knight. You've got a nail.
Oh God, you read my mind. You and I are gonna become fast friends.
I assumed that would happen
as well. The nail can leap to bounce off for locomotion. So they've taken the concept of a sword, and that sword can be used for combat, and it can be used to move around the environment in more interesting ways. So they're making one thing more versatile and giving the player more possibility space. So it's not about like throwing in tons more mechanics. It's about refining what you've got to give you more possibility.
Yeah, just supporting the core concept with extra stuff. Oh man, Hollow Knight. Oh God, it's one of my favorite games of all time. And you're just thinking about the fact that like basically 3 people made that game, and the sequel, I'm like chomping at the bit. I wish they would release it. Oh my God. Like it's just nuts. Like I played Hollow Knight like 2 years ago, randomly on a Christmas break. And I'm like, man, what's this game about? And I just couldn't put it down. It's fantastic. And then I got a bunch of friends to play it. And they agreed with me. And one of those guys is like super hypercritical about games, and he came to me, day after playing. I was like, yeah, you're right. You're right. This game is fantastic. God, I love Hollow Knight so much. It's a great example of tight mechanics. They knew exactly what they were making. They knew what they were making from our standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint. Using the environment to tell their story. And just the general gameplay, they made a Metroidvania game. Okay, well, in Metroidvania, there's a billion of those, but they made a Metroidvania game that stands out. I haven't had as much fun playing Metroidvania since like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and ever since Hollow Knight. This is the sad part about an addiction of a game like Hollow Knight. I've been trying to find a Metroidvania game that even comes close to it.
Spoils you, doesn't it? Yeah.
Like I just played Blue Fire, or I tried Blue Fire. And they were saying it's like a 3D Hollow Knight, and I played for maybe 2 hours, and I'm like, nope, this is not Hollow, nor is it Night. It's Blue Fire. I was very sad, and it just made me want Silksong so bad. Yeah, I love Hollow Knight. Good stuff.
And on that possibility thing too, like what I really appreciate is it's not just about what you can do as a player; it's how you want to engage with the mechanics of the game.
Yes.
And so one thing I really appreciate with Hollow Knight is that some people really like getting lost in the world of Hollow Knight, like just Hollow Nest running around doing stuff. Other people don't. They want to explore and solve the story or whatever. And so the fact that the map is not mandatory, but it's optional, and the fact that you can choose to put a compass, but you don't have to, the fact that you can choose to not use any of those things and instead overload your character to give yourself more power but take more risks, means that you can literally decide, do I want to play the game for more for the story, more for the combat, more for the exploration, and you get to decide your approach to the same experience. So that they know their audience, because some people like Metroidvanias for the difficulty, other people like it for the exploration or whatever. So it lets you tune it, which is a kind of a cool feature.
Yeah, and that's been a big thing. That's not probably not necessarily an intentional example of it, but a lot of games recently in the past 3-4 years have been doing this kind of customized difficulty or customized new game plus thing. Borderlands 3 had the post game where you can define how difficult you want mobs to be and stuff like that. Just to go to the game again, it doesn't really matter a whole lot as far as you're just tuning your experience when it comes to this extended difficulty, which is just a fun. It almost kind of goes back to the whole sandbox concept. It's like a sandbox difficulty setting, which is really interesting, and just adds to replay value of the game. Of course, because there's 3 billion games coming out every day, it's hard to like invest in one game for a long time without having to jump on something else. But it's a really interesting concept that pretty much every game feels like they have now.
There's an interesting question here. I'd love to hear the room's opinion on. Someone says here, any advice for beginners who is designing a story-driven game for the first time? So I'd love to see what the room has to say about that.
You guys want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think my first thought is like make sure you understand, your story from start to finish. I think that's important. You don't want to kind of go into it having like a loose idea. You should know where it's going to go and how it's going to end before you start developing. And then I think another thing would probably be there's a lot of ways to answer this question, obviously, but whatever the genre of game you're creating that's going to tell this story, just trying to isolate the game mechanics that are going to serve that story the most. I guess I think of a game like Heavy Rain. Like the game mechanics really served to tell that story, the dialogue, the exploration, the way the environment's set up with the static cameras at times. So I think isolating all those things up front ahead of time are really going to help you be successful in the end, because things like scope creep, we've kind of talked about scope creep and feature creep and things like that. It's going to help you really stay focused. And then also knowing how it's going to end, I think, is going to allow you to have the creativity to add extra bits going on, like side quests and like branches to the story and things like that.
Yeah, I can't disagree. Ultimately, know where you want to end up and then kind of work back from there. It's kind of a cliche thing, but it works out pretty well. You could high level it. You could just get a bunch of boxes together. This is my end. This is my middle. This is my beginning. And then from there, you can kind of do some small branching. And then maybe you can like go into it a little bit when it comes to the core design, because as a part of the core design, as you're building, your design doc or whatever, some stuff's going to fall out from your foundation in your inspiration of a story. But if you have this like a full out story, then yeah, like you're already starting well. I mean, if it's an adventure game, then you have to consider things like puzzles and how these things work. You think about games like old games like Seventh Guest and things like that, old fantastic adventure games, or even Myst. There's a whole lot of story to Myst.
My favorite game.
Right? A whole lot of story to Myst. But the question is how much of that story is like 3 or 4 novels, but really the game just gives you like the core story that they wanted to tell. Yeah, that's me. I'll fix that in a second.
Okay.
But yeah, so yeah, I'd say you just have your main story, like Charles was saying, and then just kind of block it out, and then just see where you go from there. People's minds work in different ways. Like I'll if I have to design something, I just have an idea of it, and I just start like kind of get it in my brain. I'll go to the whiteboard, I'll draw some stuff out, and then I just start writing a design doc, using 1 or 2 standard formats that I use, and I just start cranking stuff out. And as a part of that writing, like a new idea will pop in. Okay, how does this fit with this? Let me define a loop real quick, and just kind of visualize a loop and say, oh man, this will work. Let me pull this out. So for me, like I don't necessarily need like a super low level idea. I just need something like really simple and basic. And then I just start writing stuff out, and then it just turns into something large. And then once I get back and step back and look at it and go, okay, let me carve this out. Let me see. Let me refine this down to its essence, and then I'm good to go. But yeah, so sorry, I keep rambling.
It's good.
Oh man, it's good stuff.
You're in good company for rambling. Don't worry.
I'm gonna try to update the chat real quick too, so we can see it in here.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I was curious what's going on.
I'll give my answer then while you're doing that. This is another one. Just I want to say 2 parts of this. The first one is going to sound a bit harsh, but when people first start playing your game, nobody cares about your story, and I really do mean this. And you don't yourself, if you're being honest with yourself, you're never going to sell someone on a pitch by saying, "Okay, I've got a book here. Let me read to you the plot, the characters, the protagonist." And this is one of the worst things you can do for a pitch for a game, because the way you get people engaged in your story is you get them engaged over time by introducing elements. So don't start with your essay. Don't start with like back in the land before. None of that. Doesn't matter. Start your game, get people engaged in the characters, and have the story grow from that. And the second part of this is, how do you actually do that? Well, you do that by respecting your characters. And this is just the worst thing that games do. It drives me insane. Is a lot of people have a vision for where they want to go, and so they take their characters and say, well, he's the villain, so he has to do bad things, and they're the protagonists, they're going to do good things, and then we'll just like mash it together in a line till the story happens. But in real life, that's not how interesting stories happen. Nobody sees themselves as the villain of their own story. So you need to understand your own characters. If you've got different characters, ask yourself, who are they? What do they want? Why are they there? What are their objectives? And if you're trying to write an interesting story and having trouble, don't start with the monomyth approach of hero gets weapon, goes fights boss, their girlfriend gets stolen nonsense. That's fine if that's if that's not the point of the story. But if you're trying to tell a story, instead start with, who is this person? What do they like? What do they dislike? And write these out for yourself. And then ask yourself, in a scenario where they're in a post-apocalyptic world, what would this kind of person do? What would this kind of person do? And you'll find the story will almost tell itself, right? Because you can kind of guess how certain people thrown in a room together would act a certain way. And some of the best stories are, and you'll hear a lot of writers talk about this, the stories, they'll not want to kill a character because they like the character, but the story's going that way, and they'll begrudgingly have to admit that's what the story needs. And so if you want to tell an interesting story, don't like just assume your character needs to at some point get this weapon, therefore I will send them into the room and they get the weapon. Ask yourself, why would the villain have put it there, or why would it be left in this room in the first place? And try to manufacture a reason for stuff to exist. And then once you do that, the story will feel more cohesive. And you'll also notice you'll have more positions to put environmental storytelling, because you'll have actually built Jeff, who works here in the office one evening, put it there and did this, and then this happened, and then he left the door unlocked because his daughter's sick. And like, even if you don't put this in the story, you know it, and you'll start driving your design around these ideas, and your story will become more fleshed out as a result. So don't just like make the most boring linear story because that's obviously what's happening. Ask yourself who the characters are and let them tell the story to you. It'll just be a more interesting story overall. And you can see that in Hollow Knight, right? Hollow Knight is so filled with lore, with every character all has their own little thing, right? So I don't want to go to that whole thing again, but you can see it, like you can follow the path. So each character did something or was somebody, and then something happened. And a lot of it doesn't come through in the story, but you can tell there's depth there, you know?
And it's that, that big thing that they do there is it's just visual storytelling. It's the environment is telling the story. Same with games like I mentioned earlier, Uncharted. Uncharted 2 is like one of my favorite games. Outside of the fact that you can replay it as Donut Drake, who's just a gigantic fat Drake with a donut in his pocket, while you're climbing trains and stuff like that. It's also just, like you said, respecting your characters. The entire series does that. But when it comes to Uncharted 2, it's just visual storytelling left and right. Like, I felt so immersed in the game, and I love playing Drake, because Drake is just a badass, and he's just kind of the wisecracking kind of Indiana Jones style character, and it just plays out so well. And you just get to points in the game where you're just like, oh man, I want to know about this. I want to go to this spot. And it's just like, I don't need you to tell me much stuff. I don't need a cutscene. I don't need, although there's plenty in the game. I don't need all that stuff. But just like environmental storytelling it's fantastic. You can just throw something in the background that just looks goofy. Look at Jason's background there with all those freaking lights and all that stuff. You got questions about everything back there. It just draws your attention. It may have nothing to do with anything, but then you start forming a story in your own head as a player. Like, oh man, I wonder what's that crazy shrunken head in the background there? What are those lights? There's got to be something goofy going on. Maybe there was some worshiping going on. Maybe there's like, who was that guy that got killed? Like you're creating a story out of just nothing. Like, I got a Dalek back here. Maybe I am a Dalek. I don't know. It's just kind of cool when you can throw stuff in the background. Then, you go, you start just play through the game. Man, cat's awesome. You play it through the game, and then like something later in the game will reference something that was in the background of the screen, and you'll go back to that, and then it just visual storytelling is just fantastic, and from a gameplay standpoint, you don't have people reading a bunch of words. You look at old games like Banjo-Kazooie, or Conker's Bad Fur Day, stuff like that.
Oh my gosh, classics.
they didn't have to do much to tell a story to get you involved. They have the mumbling sound, the blah, 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 blah sound. They don't have to have VO or anything like that. You're reading a chat bubble real quick, but they still like get it across because the characters are colorful and great, and they're not all just like two-dimensional. Like you said, everyone's great. You look at I think it's what is the thing? The hero's journey, I think, is what like Star Wars is based off of and all that stuff. And even in that core concept of storytelling, there is no like black and white. There's just these things. The hero goes through these motions here, but it doesn't mean that the bad guy is necessarily just always bad. It's a point of perspective. He's doing. Darth Vader wasn't a bad person. He was just a tragic hero or a tragic villain, and tragic villain is always like super, super interesting, because if you can get someone to relate to your antagonist who was just like maybe presented as pure evil, and in the end they're like feeling bad for him, it's like, oh man, I really love this game. It's just something that stays with you as a gameplay experience.
Yeah, and there's so many variations on this. If you're looking for a more linear approach to how do you tell a story that's got that intrigue but also has some rules behind it, what we were kind of referencing there was the monomyth, which is your standard hero goes on an adventure and does something. Yeah. But a lot of people mistakenly see that as just, I have hero, I have MacGuffin, hero gets MacGuffin, they kill bad guy, and that's it. But it's more in depth than that. What you actually have to do is structure it more. So what's actually going on in that loop, in a proper sense, is there's a protagonist, and then something happens, and that's normally your village burns down, your son gets kidnapped, whatever the story is, some event happens, and now you need something. You need to get them back, you need to get more powerful to beat the bad guy, you need something. So change, need, then you go on an adventure, and you go and search for whatever it is you need, for strength, for courage, for a sword, it doesn't matter, and you're going to fail. You're going to end up having to fail and learn from that lesson, get better and stronger, and then you eventually find it, and then you take whatever it is you've got, and you go forth on your journey, and you return back to the destination, and then you succeed, and you're changed as a result. And that last bit's the important one. You are now a different character. You've gone through something, and so your opinion has changed, and then possibly another loop happens again. But that's the structure of a story. Like, it's not just that something happened and they want something and there's a bad guy or a villain. There's this cycle of how it affects the protagonist and the characters. And you can take that same approach and apply it to the villain. The villain wants something, so they want a son, so they take someone's son, and then they go through this process, and now they have so you can go through it whatever way you like, but the point is you have to go through the sequence of steps to give depth to your story. And so if you approach it from that angle, you end up with stories that just have a lot of layers to it that you wouldn't get if you just write, start, middle, end.
Another great another great example where I think it's still kind of the same vein is just like kind of the surprise twist at the end, and managing to nail that. You think a game of Shadow of Colossus. Did anyone see the end of Shadow of Colossus coming? I don't think so.
No.
If you're genuinely playing it the first time, you haven't looked up anything online, and you just play it, the ending is tragic and horrible and extremely memorable, and makes it one of the most fantastic game experiences you're going to go through, because you're riding a horse, you're climbing these big things that are just kind of mindless. You just see these big titans and you kill them, and when they die, you're just like, what the hell did I just do? And then you just start feeling bad about this thing. And so this thing that just felt like really honorable that you're doing, it now just feels like you're murdering things. And your conscience just starts like, oh man, I don't want to do this, but then you do it, and then you think you're gonna get salvation at the end, and well, I might have just ruined it for some people. But if you haven't played it, then shame on you. Go play it. But yeah, so like even that setup
too, right? Like there's the I love how they foreshadow that too. Like you've got these big elegant creatures that are doing nothing, and then the act of killing them, darkness appears, literal darkness. It's you're like, you have to question your relationship to the game you're playing.
It's once again, it's like visual story. It's visual storytelling. It's great. And and just any point where you can get someone to like think twice about what they're doing, in this virtual world. Is think about it having I've lost my words here. But any time that someone feels bad about the decision they're making. Another game that this happened to me on, and I was like, it sticks in my brain a bunch, is I was a huge fan of original Infamous. Infamous is basically like a Star Wars type deal. You got red light and you blue light, and that's the game basically. Fantastic game. Then Infamous 2 comes out, and I'm like, oh yeah, Infamous 2. Infamous 2 wasn't as good, but what Infamous 2 had in it is a moment where Cole's best friend, I can't remember his name for the life of me, but Cole's best friend, there's a moment towards the end of the game where you basically have to choose to kill him or not. And I'm sitting there with the controller, and that moment comes up, and I had to stop, and I was like, man, I genuinely don't know what to do here. Like I actually feel emotionally attached to this character. I mean, I played one, so I had some background for him, but I'm just like, man, this is weird. Like this game generally overall is just kind of a meh sandbox game and not the best sequel. And then boom, this moment, I'm just like, oh wow, okay, well, I think I'm gonna kill you. And I felt bad about killing him. Like but it's just that weird moment that came out of this kind of generally mediocre game to me, that is super memorable. And so now Infamous 2 is just one of those games that I bring up when I'm talking about this type of stuff, which I'm bringing up now, because it was a moment that I think was executed very well. And they had just kind of built up to this without me realizing it, which is another like example of just like great game design, whether intentional or not, getting you to that moment where you're just like, oh, as a player, you're like completely immersed and you don't realize it. You are completely invested in this character, and it's pretty great.
Telltale games do that so well. I had two moments in particular that will stick with me forever. One of them I've mentioned before, which is so again, the premise of that game is that you start out as just a guy trying to escape from a zombie scenario, and you find a little girl in a treehouse, and she's basically like, she needs help, and you're like, okay, fine, I'll take her under my wing, I have to look after her. And the whole point of the story is to get you to start engaging with the idea that you're protecting her. And you don't even realize you're doing this until a certain point in the story. And then there's a point for me where it was so subtle. It's not like a really, like you could do this badly with a real dramatic, oh my God, she's in danger, so save her. Of course you're going to save her. But what they did is we're with a group of people and we see a car full of food. And it's like, do you steal the food? The car's on, the door is open. Clearly somebody was just here. This isn't like leftover food. This is somebody who's built supplies, who's going away. And we're like, we will be bad people if we steal all their food. And the thing is though, we have people we need to feed. And I don't care. I'm a very, in games like that, I'm an immoral person. I will just take the food, no problem. But something stopped me. And I went, wait a minute, if I take this food, I'm setting a bad precedent for her, that this is the right thing to do. And is this the world that I want to say that we should create going forward? And that was like, it stopped me for the first time ever in a decision like that. I went, oh, I don't know. And I put the controller down and I really, really sat and thought about it. And it took me a while to come up with the answer. And the same thing happened later on in the story where they said that we've been under attack multiple times. And it's like, do you teach her to shoot? And I stopped and went,
oh yeah, I remember this.
It could save her life. But also, I mean, what if she kills somebody? And like, I don't want her to have to live with that as an accident. And because this kind of game is designed to build controversy, so they're going to put her in a situation. So I'm asking myself, do I want to do that? Is it worse for me to give her that chance, or can I trust myself to always be there to save her? And it's just like how much layers of depth of story is that I was like, I was completely changing my behavior relative to how I thought another character might perceive the actions that I was doing. So well told.
Yeah.
So sounds like you're ready to have a kid, dude.
if you contrast that, so like a Telltale thing and Walking Dead, that I think is easy to relate to because it's real. It's modern day life effectively, right? It's just normal cars and houses, nothing floating, nothing goofy, no sci-fi, it's craziness. But if you were to take that and the backdrop was a sci-fi world, that's something that's not realistic, something that you can't walk outside your house and point to something that you might have seen in the game. Do you think it would affect you in the same way? Do you think the characters would be as relatable? I'm talking like playing a game like Mass Effect or something like that, where it's built on making these serious decisions. In the end, I think people just end up gaming it, right? I want to have a save for every possible outcome, so I can say that I did this in Mass Effect 2 and 3. Let's stop talking. Or so because of that, if Mass Effect was more of a modern day backdrop, I don't think it would be as popular. But it was a modern day backdrop. Do you think that you would relate to the characters more and feel more of a I guess a crisis of consciousness when you're making those decisions? What is that you're pulling down? What is that?
Well, it's just while you're bringing it up, I was just like, Mass Effect, Portal,
there you go.
Infamous. I'm just like, these are all 100% right up my
alley. He did say I played all the games. But yeah,
every game ever made.
I feel like for me, my answer is it would make it more relatable if it was in some. I mean, it would make it something that, yeah, like making it more relatable by putting it in a backdrop that I can relate to is better. And for me, I mean, I can't speak for others. I played Cyberpunk recently, and there's like some heart-wrenching scenes, right? Well, heart-wrenching scenes. They could be heart-wrenching, and right in the beginning. And for me, I was like, I just can't relate to these people. I can't put myself in their shoes. So, I recognize that it's sad, but even then, like the relationships of certain people that, one guy dies very early on. I won't say it. It's not much of a spoiler, but even in that moment, I was like really trying to feel, sadness and like what the game developers and designers intended for me to feel. But I was just like, I don't know. I can't put myself in their shoes. They're doing these high stake things in this world where it just seems like you can't really die, but you can. You have cybernetics, and I'm like, it's cool, but I don't have that same gut wrenching feeling if I'm playing like Fable and I'm met with a decision. And even Fable isn't necessarily something that I can relate to because it's in like medieval times, but I can relate to it more for some reason. I don't know why.
Yes, because it's medieval time, like it's Renaissance. But do you think that in a game that's more sci-fi, that's hyper unrealistic, that it's easier to be immoral than in a game where
I'm going to say my hot take, and I say I don't think the setting matters. I'm actually going to say that I understand that the argument here that it doesn't feel as grounded to you, but I would disagree because I would say the problem isn't that the problem isn't that it's not grounded to you. It's the problem it's not grounded to you yet. And I think there is rules to a universe, and if a story builds those rules correctly, then it feels like there is weight to decisions. The problem is a lot of sci-fi worlds have this sort of ... and sci-fi magic. And so there's no sense of continuity of death or things mattering. I don't actually, I think you could tell a compelling story about, a person losing their job and then, feeling angry and wanting to take revenge on their boss and tell it anywhere. You just have to figure out, does it feel like could you get the emotion into that story? So I don't think the fact that it's in space or something is inherently the problem. I think the problem is if you set the story up such that your silent protagonist is a running, gunning, shooting character, you're putting the seed in the player's mind that that's how this character solves problems. And so that's why your character you might feel it's okay to be more immoral. But if you tell a story like Mass Effect, where the story is about a character who is, trying to solve diplomatic problems, you're going to approach it more diplomatically because your characterization of the story is that way, right? So I don't think it's the setting. I think it's usually the framing device of how the characters work and how grounded the rules of its own universe are.
Yeah, I think it's that ... that throws me off with things like Cyberpunk. And even for me, I don't know if it's going to be controversial, but I could never get into the Marvel universe. Like my wife and I are trying to watch it right now, and I'm just like, I don't care about these people. Like I can't relate to them at all. And I don't have a comic book background, so I don't know the whole stories and all that. But yeah, it's like that ... that gets me.
I am a big comic collector. Have been for a long time. I'm more a Marvel kid than a DC kid, but I love all the characters. But you actually, this goes into kind of what I was saying, or I was going to bring up. Your sci-fi backdrop, and it also relates. Like my point relates also to something like Spider-Man as a character, as a hero. Spider-Man, has been Peter Parker forever. There's a billion different Spider-Man characters right now, but the core Spider-Man has always been Peter Parker, and they've reset him and reboot him a bunch of times in the comics. They don't get rid of Peter Parker because Peter Parker is the ultimate relatable superhero. He's down in his luck. He doesn't have a lot of money. He's scrimping and scrumping here, but he's got this sense of justice and honor. He doesn't kill. He doesn't do these things. So that makes him like super, super popular. And when you're playing Spider-Man, you are 100% compelled to not be immoral at all. Like you don't want to pass anyone who needs help or anything like that if you have the opportunity. Same with Miles Morales. He is basically the next Peter Parker. And he's the same way. Like his character is 100%. Like he's actually seems like he's more about justice and honor. He's younger, so it makes sense than Peter Parker. So when it comes to like a character like that, you mentioned silent protagonists, Jason, which don't get me started on silent protagonists. It drives me nuts. You mentioned silent protagonists, but there is definitely a contrast there. A silent protagonist is supposed to be you. So when you make a decision, you are making this decision. Unfortunately for me, it doesn't resonate as much with me because I can never say anything out loud. So it feels like I'm just this old school adventure game box that I'm just typing in stuff. Doesn't mean anything. But when it comes to another character that's defined, that has a personality, it's supposed to be a certain way. You look at Shepard from Mass Effect, even though he's supposed to be kind of a blank slate, they still give you choose some backgrounds for him, but in the end, like Shepard is supposed to be, a good guy. Like he's supposed to be this hero, and you can turn him into, a very mean person. It's still, in the end, he's still doing something honorable, right? He's still saving the universe or whatever it may be. But on the way there, like you can have him do some really dirty, nasty things to get the job done. And that actually feels like, it just feels wrong. It feels like I'm violating this kind of pure character versus silent protagonist. I'm just like, whatever. Like, this world isn't real. Like I can't go fly spaceships. No one's gonna come after me for doing this thing. Whatever. I'll just do whatever. So it feels less, for me, it feels less impactful. Certainly when it's silent protagonist. Unless it is a game where I can 100% relate to. If I can go outside and see the same car, or someone who looks like someone that I may be seeing in a video game, then I might feel a little bit more about like shooting them in the face on the road. In the game, of course. Let's get that very clear. So I think it's just kind of an interesting. Yeah, you got silent protagonist. Got me started. Oh man. I think it's kind of an interesting thing to think about, backdrop. And then you go to things like Witcher. I think I can relate more to playing Witcher because swords, not necessarily sorcery, but swords and sorcery are more relatable to me as a thing, because I can go get a sword, I have a couple here, and go start striking things and bring up a shield and scream Camelot at the top of my lungs, and raise a banner, versus bringing out my ray gun and getting in my spaceship and flying away. But I guess if you can tell a good story and it's deep, and the moment to moment is solid, I guess in the end it won't matter. But I think it's a little bit more difficult to pull that off if the backdrop is more sci-fi or less believable.
Well, I think that like one of the most immersive moments for me in a game was it was in Half-Life, but Half-Life VR. But not the new one. It was in the original Half-Life with the mod made by Wormslayer and a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
And the moment for me wasn't the gameplay. It wasn't like the major portion of the story. It was near the start of the story when you're kind of going through the different rooms and you meet Alex, I should say. And she brings you into the elevator, and you're in the elevator going down, and you're about to basically move the vending machine aside to find the secret passageway.
Yeah.
And the moment that stood out to me is I was sitting in the elevator with her, and she said, "Oh, hi, I don't know if you remember me, Gordon," and all this stuff. And they clearly recorded that character's motions, because she's basically like, got one foot on the ground and sort of looking sheepishly at the floor. And I can tell in that moment as a player, oh, she's shy. She's embarrassed. She doesn't know if I remember.
Yeah, yeah.
And I like all of a sudden I'm like, holy shit! I just learned a lot about this character. Like in one moment of interaction, I learned that she's got this like goofy sort of self-deprecating kind of awkward personality, and she's uncomfortable to be in this room, and she's trying to make conversation. And it's like, holy shit! Even though it's a silent protagonist, I just like all of a sudden I'm engaged with this conversation. With this
yeah.
For like in like a split second of dialogue, and I think there's a psychological onus to this in terms of how people interact. Like one of my favorite studies of all time was they had people at a I think it was like an art exhibit, and they had people walk around and look at different paintings. And then the study was they would have someone come in and offer, like, there's a table full of water that's free, and they'd have someone come in and take one of the bottles of water that's free that you could have reached yourself, walk up to the stranger and say, oh, here you go, here's a bottle of water. And they said, oh, thanks. And then they'd ask that person for money. They would say, oh, can I borrow five pounds or something? And it's something like 70% of people will give you the £5 if you've given them the bottle of water that is free, that you didn't pay for, that you could have picked up yourself. Because it's this reciprocation thing, right? People feel this like, oh, they're a nice person, they gave me something, I owe them something. And there's a lot of these little tricks. And so even in a game, a lot of the problem is that so many characters are kind of Skyrim-esque, where they're just like, they're dialogue bots who just stand there. And that's why it's so important when the characters in a story engage with you, the player. They give you stuff, they interact with you. They feel like I always love it when you talk to a character and they're like, oh, actually, no, I'm too busy for you right now. It's like, it's really annoying, but you're like, oh, they actually have a life that isn't me. They're not just like hovering in existence waiting for me to arrive, you know?
Yeah. I think that experiment, I wonder, it would be interesting if they were also testing like the pay it forward rule. Like you give someone a free bottle of water, then have someone else ask for $5 to see if that person would instantly feel compelled to kind of do something for another person. Because they were, someone was generous to them. That would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, it's called the Benjamin Franklin rule or something like that, where one of his political enemies, he asked them to borrow a book, and because that person did a kind act for him, like it smoothed over their relationship for the rest. I don't know what it is. Look it up, Benjamin Franklin.
That's cool.
I'll look it up right now. Oh, the Ben Franklin effect. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
A proposed psychological phenomenon: a person who has already performed a favor for another person is more likely to do another favor for the other. Than if they had received a favor from that person. So you make people do favors for you, and they're more likely to continue doing favors for you. Yeah, well, it speaks to like the broad number of psychological things you can put into your
everybody,
game.
Please hit the thumbs up button.
Yeah.
Do me a favor.
Do me a favor. Hit the thumbs up.
Give me a solid.
Nice.
And then after you've done that favor, follow it up with a subscribe. That's how you get to subscribe.
Oh, that's how this works. Gotcha.
Yeah. Got to subscribe and like and all that stuff.
There
were a lot of questions in chat, by the way. I wanted to share one.
I can't see any questions.
I know it's there's something wrong, and I can't get them to pop up in the stream. I'd like to be able to show them right here, but I'm afraid if I do anything too wild, I'm just going to break the whole thing.
Sounds like you need to work on your moment-to-moment design. Because
it sounds like I need to work on my planning and preparation and testing. Right, I did not test well enough or plan. Yeah, it worked fine last time, so I just assumed it was going to work this time.
Yeah, we didn't anyway derail into a big conversation, so I think we probably should answer some questions. I feel bad.
No, I think it's good stuff.
I'm sorry.
It's good conversation so far.
It's my fault.
But there, on the topic of like story and design and stuff, one of the questions in there was about just keeping. Somebody was asking if they should just work on their project in secret for 2 years and not release anything because they don't want the story to get out. They want to keep it secret and keep their design secret. My advice, obviously, no. But what do you guys all think of this whole idea of like keeping your game design or your story or the whole thing under wraps until you release it?
No, I mean,
does anybody think that's a good plan?
Well, I mean, it depends. Like, do they not want to reveal something in their story? Like, if that is that the thing, or like
it sounds like a lot of time they just don't want people to steal the idea.
Oh, I mean. I wouldn't worry.
I don't
Like,
know, man. There's an old saying: your idea is worth the paper it's printed on.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
nobody wants to steal whatever idea you have until it's proven. People didn't steal Minecraft till it was already a success, right?
yes,
Like the idea is your idea on paper is not something you should hide, and in fact, it's doing you a disservice in multiple different channels. If you're not putting it out there, you're not building an audience. You're not getting one of the biggest things you can do for your game is build a list of wish lists on Steam, and you can only do that if you put something up there and get people engaged with your content. Separately from that, your game won't get better until you have feedback, until you have people working on it, you can play with it, and you can do stuff with it. So is it, do you want to have a secret thing that gets released after 2 years that might bomb? Or do you want to have constant cycling of improvement and stuff and then end up producing something you're proud of? Like, it's never a good idea to just hide this thing away and hope that you nail it first time without any feedback from people.
Now, I mean, now if secret means there's me and a team of like, 100 people and we're all keeping it under wraps and we've got an effective like, design team or development team, sure, because you're getting, some sort of feedback, even if it is, somewhat biased, theoretically, I guess. But I mean, if the core concern is I just don't want to reveal the end of my story, like Shadow of the Colossus, you can keep that under wraps, but still like nail your product, of course. But if it's worried about someone stealing your stuff, you'll be fine. I mean, to your point, Jason, like it's proven. Like I don't want to, unless I'm like some sort of great prophet and I can look into the future and say, okay, this idea is going to be gold. I'm taking this right now. That whoever's stealing your idea has to catch up. They have to do the same. Like and this one idea can spawn like how many iterations of something else. So I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, if you believe in your product, if you believe in your idea, have fun with it. Do the best you can. Give it the best, the best foot forward you can. I mean, I'm all weird, all upset. Do it proper justice. And if it's a labor of love, if you put all your work into it, it's going to end up, paying off in some way, shape, or form. If anything, it's experience, right? The experience of getting out there, getting people to talk about your stuff, all that stuff will pay off for your next project.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. It's what people always miss, and I think a lot of people keep stuff secret and they just end up never releasing it. And most of the time, when people tell me they have a secret project or they're NDA'd up and they don't want anybody to know about their thing, they end up not going anywhere with it because it's just too hard to keep it under wraps and keep progress and keep it kind of motivated. There was another really good game design question. I actually saw this. It's been in chat a bunch of times. I got it in an email a couple of times, and I saw a YouTube comment yesterday about it. And I wanted to bring this up for. It's not just game design, but it was how to start I want to be a game designer. I'm in my 40s, even 50s, 60s, whatever. I want to start doing game design, been doing something else the whole time. How do I start that? I mean, for programming, I kind of can give an answer because it's essentially the same, right? You got to learn to write the code, prove that you can write the code, which you can do all from outside of the industry. I think the design part's probably a little bit harder, though. Have you seen many people kind of jump into game design, that were past their 20s, like in their 30s or older?
I mean, me personally, no. I mean, I work with a guy right now who's in his 40s and he's a young designer experience-wise, but he's just a guy who was at a company for a long time, and after that company, got smaller and smaller, he ended up getting an opportunity. And he took advantage of an opportunity, but before that he was QA and stuff like that for a long period of time. So he just worked like a legit, honest, supplemental or support game development role and waited for his opportunity. And in that time he took cues from the people he was working with, and got better and stuff like that. I don't think he did any personal project stuff. I think he just, watched and learned and talked to people and built connections, things like that. But if you are literally out of the industry, like you're in some other industry and you're trying to break into game design, like right now, I don't know that it's that difficult actually with the proliferation of Unreal and Unity, and you can go online and learn how to build whatever you want to build so easily. And the interfaces of multiple engines and stuff are all pretty similar. It's easy to jump from one thing to the other. Actually making something is so easy right now. I think it comes down to drive. If you're looking for second career because you're retiring or something like that, and you got time on your hands, I think you can jump into game design pretty easily. But it just comes down to type of person you are. Like, people need to understand that game design isn't just we just put something in a box and goes. The game design is really like a true. It's important to understand human behavior, sociology, psychology. These things are big when it comes to game design. I mean, video games are just interactive television. TV comes out, people are in there, dopamine's like firing because something super exciting is happening on the screen. And then video games are just like the next step. I can actually interact with this. It all comes down to human behavior, human interaction with the medium. And so, like, understanding that, regardless of when you're getting into the industry, is huge. And not just thinking that games are just these, weird things that people do when they're young. Games are huge. You look at things like sports games, and how it inspires certain people who can't play sports to just like do good or do better or jump into the industry and do major things. I mean, you look at the history of Madden on Sega and how they came about. They came about because someone who was black and gay couldn't play football, but he got into the notion of Madden and helped bring Madden to Sega. It might be misrepresenting the story a little bit, but it's a general story that you can look up. But yeah, so like I think jumping into game design later in life, right now, it's got to be super easy. I mean, I've been making games for almost 20 years, so I can't really speak to it because I got into it when I was young. It's very fortunate. But right now, like, it's crazy.
You bring up a good point with the fortunate part, right? And this is one thing I always tell people when they ask, how did you get into X? If you're in a creative field, how did you get into it? Well, I would say if you ask someone who won the lotto and bought themselves a Lamborghini, how do I get a Lamborghini? They'll say step one, win the lotto, right? They can only give you the advice of the experience they've had.
Yep.
And so I'll always take with a grain of salt any advice from somebody who's in a creative-ish field, because it's usually a good part of luck. And industries flow and change. And so the methods with which I got into doing this won't be available to you because it was through like a VR subreddit of something other, and I met the right people in the right time to do this, that, or the other. So that's one, is that it's mostly luck to get the right people at the right time, but luck favors the prepared, as they say. And so you can do things to increase your odds of getting the life you want or the things you want to do by being sensible about it. And that's why my advice to everybody who ever says, I want to get into games or do whatever, is probably don't quit your job and go all in on it. Is give yourself actionable skills, give yourself a job of, if you want to get into programming in game development, start by learning programming, get a job in programming, and you can get money and resources and skills that you can then move into games. It's very, very hard to just get into I have a degree with game development in the title. My first jobs I applied for was working at, I think it was it Ubisoft? It basically, one of them opened up an office in Galway where I lived, and it was like, I thought I could just get into games, and it doesn't work like that. They wouldn't even let me be in the call center without 4 years of call center experience. Like, you can't just leap into this experience. So it usually works through you set yourself up, and then you sort of route your way in by joining communities, meeting people, doing game jams. It's networking, it's finding the right connections. So there's no like direct path, but I would say just be careful in terms of taking raw advice from strangers, like even myself, but just make a point of like, be pragmatic and set yourself up in such a way where you're likely to meet the right people.
Meeting people is the most important part. Like, having the network and the connections. I mean, I got into the game industry from meeting people that I played video games with. I mean, Ed, I told you many times, like Ed sent me a message on EverQuest. I logged in to say hi to people. He sent me a message and said, "Hey, you want to come work for me?" First game job. All right, like in QA. And yeah, I was like, all right, this is all. And it just came from, talking to people relatively constantly and about the things they were doing too. So it happened to know that I knew how to write some code because I'd showed them some things and talked about things before, totally unrelated, not like trying to work there or anything. But I think that same kind of thing, just meeting a lot of people, talking to people. I've known a lot of people who were in their early 20s, even like teens, that got into game programming jobs as their first job. But they were also, I mean, all of the ones, again, probably my exposure, but they were all very active in going to things like meetups and user group type things, or they were active in like a Twitch or Discord or somewhere. So they had people that they were talking to relatively often, and then they'd look at maybe doing a little bit of contract stuff at first, and they got into the industry and got hired. I can think of quite a few people just locally.
That's pretty much
alone.
my story. Exactly the same thing. Start with the job, working in enterprise development, doing contract work on the side. Met the right people. They invited me to work on a game jam. Met a bunch of game developers. They wanted me to work on other projects. All of a sudden, I'm doing Unity stuff for a living.
Yeah. For me here, there are a lot of Unity meetups too. So there are a lot of like people just getting straight into not even having to do the corporate stuff like I did in the past and like you did. Like they're just going straight in. Like the meetups are all Unity and game development related, and they're hiring. I mean, they're still not necessarily games that they're working on, but they're working in game engines at the very least a lot of the time. Most of the games too.
My path to the industry was way different and goofy. But it was literally luck. It was after a series of crazy things, Navy, discharged because I was disabled, doing game reviews with this little startup online magazine with a friend that I met through a girlfriend. And then I ended up working at GameStop just because I wanted to be around video games. And this guy, John Bautista, he walked into GameStop working at Sony Live Entertainment, which was right down the street. And he just randomly like, hey, you want to come work at SOE? And I went and interviewed, became a GM for EverQuest, and then worked in QA and got a chance to work on Star Wars Galaxies. And that was it. I went out to Austin, worked on Star Wars Galaxies for a little bit, like a dream job. Star Wars fan. Star Wars Galaxies is, the first Star Wars MMO. Working with Raph Koster, and worked with Jalon Brack, who's the president of Blizzard, and came back, got a job at EverQuest, and that's all she wrote. I wasn't even thinking about being a game designer or anything like that. I just liked video games. I liked writing about them. I liked, doing customer service for them. I started tech support was my first thing, answering phones, getting cussed at, and called all kinds of racist slurs and all kinds of goofy stuff. Just because some guy randomly walks in GameStop and looks at me and it's like, hey, I remember you're a cool dude. Do you want to come work for us? And boom, 20 years later, I got a job working on something I never thought I'd be able to work on and having fun with it. You paths are completely different for everybody. But we all end up, in a good place, hopefully, because making games is super fun. It's hard. It's hard as heck, but it is super fun. It's one of the greatest jobs to ever have.
Yeah.
I think I know something that Jason and I have talked about a lot on our live streams is just, authentically being a part of a community and positioning yourself. And I think everyone's going to have a similar story. Like they were doing something slightly related to game development, game design, and then they happened to be hooked up with someone who could propel them in the right direction. I think it's, it feels like luck, but yeah, I mean, preparation favors. What is it, Jason? What's your quote there?
Sorry, which quote?
Something favors luck favors the prepared.
Luck favors the prepared.
Yeah. Essentially, that's just what you have to do. You just have to keep staying in it, being a part of communities if you can, trying to just work with people, and eventually something will stick. I think there's plenty of opportunities out there. The industry is constantly growing. So, yeah.
Passion, desire are the fuel. Yeah. If you don't have that, then it's just not going to happen. No matter how.
Then you won't make opportunities for luck to happen, right? You gotta be constantly out there doing stuff and pushing to get those lucky moments. A lot of people sit around and just do nothing and wait, expecting something lucky to just appear, but that never happens, right? Like you never just sitting at home doing absolutely nothing. You never talked to anybody, did anything, and suddenly somebody gives you this great position or something.
Yeah, this was one of the pushbacks I had in a comment I said before, which is I said if you want to meet people, a great example is Discord groups. Like hint hint, both of these guys have their own Discords you can join where you can meet up with people, and I'm in them, and you can chat to people about pretty much everything. And I said some of the best opportunities I've gotten were people DMing me or contacting me through those groups because they've seen me in them. And I said, if you join groups like that and are talking to people, people will see you in those groups and you're likely to meet up. But then someone said, well, I'm in lots of groups and I'm not getting any feedback. And then I said, how much do you ask questions versus do you answer them? In one of the communities, I'm like the fourth most typed. I'm the fourth most commenting person, and the other one I'm like in the top 20 or something. I constantly try to help people and answer questions. So I'm not just there for benefit for me. I'm there to help other people, and people can see that. And the way that it looks is if you're somebody who needs to find somebody to help you out on a project or to hire them or whatever, you're going to say, who do I know that I've seen be helpful and answer questions like the questions I have, and then you'll come to mind. So it's not just about being in the right places. This comes back to the whole luck favors the prepared thing, is I join communities full of people that I know are like-minded or do things like I do, and I try to help out and demonstrate the things I know how to do. And then I've basically planted all the seeds for anybody who wants to contact me about related things. I didn't just sit there and hope good things happened, right? You have to be practical and pragmatic in sort of giving yourself that opportunity.
And you're also setting a stage and setting an example for other people who might be shy. You know, they see you commenting and stuff like that, and you might be commenting something that they know, and now they feel more compelled to help. So you're also kind of paying it forward a little bit there too, which is like super, super awesome.
Oh yeah, I mean, Jason's story is one of the people I go to when contract stuff pops up and people ask for recommendations. I'm like, oh, right there. He knows things and he's helpful and he's not.
Of course, the unfortunate thing is that you somehow met Jason Wyman here, and I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, it's interesting because everybody I meet ends up being very similar. They all like the same kind of stuff, and they're all way more into everything that I like than I am, even. Right?
Except for light walls.
Yes, apparently nobody is into RGBs as me. RGB is like the theme. I don't know. I'll have to show you sometime when you come down here, Sleem. The whole ceiling is lined with color changing RGBs that go around and stuff too.
I do not feel like
RGBs everywhere.
Like having a seizure in your house. That's
yeah, you would. It's only in my office. I'm not allowed to RGB up the entire house. I saw that the meme went on Reddit of the house with the Christmas tree that looks like RGB. It looks like a Corsair house. Like, we should do that. And my wife, nope. Just be permanent, right? Like, I just take some of these strips and just do them along the whole house. I had them along the window and stuff. Go ahead.
I'll only come over there if you have those things spell out my name when I walk into the room.
I can do that. The tiles can spell out your name.
Draw my face, right? But
I don't know if I could do your face, but I could definitely do your name across the little morphing fire tiles.
And then I can go into like my Billie Jean dance, and the lights will light up as I move. Yeah, that works.
I need to get like just a projector aimed there, so I can just project your face behind me as a backdrop.
And then on top of that, then we can just have the bullet trees come in and dance with me. And then
totally.
Now I kind of want some dancing bullet trees.
That's the new mascot now,
in the background.
Yeah.
You guys wanted a logo. There you go. It's bullet tree.
But hey, get on it. You still haven't made the logo, by the way. Slacking. We got a space for a logo right up here on the top.
If you want me to find someone and make a logo, I might be.
No, I could find someone. I want you to make one.
Oh. All right. I got the whiteboard
on the RGB thing. One of my favorite things is I had LifeX bulbs back when I was in college, and I put them up all around the house, and I had it all controlled from the phone. And you can use something like if this then that to program them. And just one day, just for fun, I set it up so that all of the lights could be sequenced. And then I purposely had, it's normal lighting in the room, whatever. And we're having a party. There was 30, 40 people around. And then I waited till somebody asked me where the bathroom is, just so I could press the button.
Oh my God.
And all the lights turned off. And it just did the ding, 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 ding.
That's hilarious. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's great.
That is fucking cool. Now you're just giving me ideas. You're going to make my wife mad.
The dumbest one I ever did though is there's this thing called a Mayo armband. It's kind of it clips onto your arm, and it basically detects the muscle changes when you make different shapes. And
gosh.
I set that up to the light, and I was basically just once, just so I could be Darth Vader. I could point to the light, and I could like rotate it and turn it up and down. It was so impractical. It was terrible, but just for that one moment of just being able to just control it.
I want one. That doesn't sound terrible at all. That sounds awesome.
Let me doing this to my lights. Yeah, dude, that sounds pretty cool.
I'm adding to my
Wayne
list.
would just do that all day. Just I get to see him sitting there twisting.
Yep.
Just dressed up.
Maybe I'd be able to relate better to Cyberpunk if I had something like that.
Yeah, there you go.
Like now I get it. Oh, that was really sad when he died.
Then those decisions would resonate with you more.
Yeah. Dim the lights when a sad moment happens. Give me some of those. That's awesome.
So, there was a question that popped up down here. I don't know if you guys see it. I don't know if you want to answer that. In my opinion, I don't know, man. Sure. I like them both, and I don't know that which one was really more enjoyable than the other. I feel like I enjoyed doing big company development first and then indie stuff after, because I feel like it would have been harder the other way around. But they both were a lot of fun, just in totally different ways. Like big companies, you learn a whole lot and you get to work on something that's really impactful and meet a ton of people. And then on indie side, you get to have a whole lot more impact on the actual project most of the time. Like with the things that you want to do, like you can do them, but you also have the responsibility there. Like there's a lot more pressure, I think, on the indie side. But there's because you have just more work that you're doing. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Salim, I'm sure you got thoughts on that.
I think I'm in the same boat as you. Indie is, you end up wearing a lot of hats because you have to manage so many things lower level because you don't have the support structure of a big studio or the money in most cases. And so there is a lot of stress, and you end up, well, I guess it could be good and bad. You end up getting opportunities to mess with or learn things that might be outside of your discipline. So you can relate or understand those things a little bit better once you do go to a bigger studio. But it is like you end up maybe diluting what your specialty is because you are doing all these things. And in a big studio, you have that support structure. You have a larger team of people. You got more personalities that you're probably meeting, and you're building more relationships. So yeah, I mean, my experience in the indie development, which I will admit has definitely been limited, is that I came out of it feeling battle hardened because I was definitely in the trenches. Doing that work. When we worked on the VR stuff, it was super fun and super freeing to be able to just come with an idea and try to do it without the overhead of a bunch of production staff and all this other stuff like telling me I can't do this, or you have this schedule or this, that, and the other. Now, granted, we had a schedule and we had to release things within a decent frame of time, but I could come in and be like, hey, I had this other idea, or let's try this, that, and the other. And I could do that with a lot of freedom and just try it and prototype fast. Like when you're in more structured environment and you want to prototype something, the stress of your production staff is, well, wait, we got a schedule to keep. Like if you're spending time doing this and then you're not getting this other work done. Whereas in India, I can just be like, you know what, I'm just going to prototype this real quick, see how this plays out, maybe like release it to a small group of people. You can do that stuff with much less stress, but obviously, the payoff for that is that if it's your livelihood or something like that, you are taking some huge risks. Whereas in a bigger studio, you can, you have to accept being on a schedule and doing those things and then work within a box that's defined for you, which is fine. I always say that, production gives us the toy box, right? It's just a box and they just say, hey, fill this thing with as many toys as you can without overflowing it. And all those toys are all the gameplay. They're all the design stuff. Obviously you want those toys to fit together and play well. You don't want to mix Barbies with Hot Wheels necessarily, but unless it's a game you're making in bullet trees. But yeah, so there's definitely pros and cons, and I've had fun in both cases. But I've been fortunate in both cases. I was working with people that I loved, that I knew outside of work. So they became friends, and I'm super loyal guy, and people I work with eventually become family to me. So for me, it doesn't matter either environment. I'm just super passionate about the work. So I find the best in both of them. So I can go either way. They're definitely both fun. I couldn't say one is more than the other. There's just a lot of pros and cons.
I totally agree. And I think we both know a lot of people that have done both, and they probably tend to agree. I think that doing both is pretty important, though. I think that there's a lot of value in work. I mean, even if it's like, sometimes it could just be that they work at a big company that started off as an indie company. I think that still counts. Like being in a smaller environment and a big environment and seeing kind of the differences and having the variety of responsibilities, I think is really good for just growth and kind of understanding the whole thing, I guess, or just everything about game development. So.
One thing I will say about indie is that indie, at least for me, indie showed me, it compelled me to try things that I hadn't done before, but it also showed me what I could do. It showed me how much passion I have for something when I really want to do it. It showed me, how much I love making games. I love talking about them, whatever. Whereas in a bigger studio environment, you just kind of talk about the thing that's there, and maybe an idea you want to express. But indie, like you have to really want to do it to be successful. And for me, like seriously, like I realized what I am capable of outside of just game design. I also like, it was refreshing for me to get into indie after being in big studio for a while, because it kind of peeled back the layers. I had calloused over on making games because I just kind of, you're on a treadmill of sorts. In indie, I kind of got to peel that callus back and find that passion again. So it was kind of refreshing, the path that I went down.
That's one of those things that people never tell you about any profession. Doesn't matter what you're doing. If you love it and you do it as a day job for somebody else, you will eventually stop loving it. There's just a point that will happen. Like I was the kid in college when I was doing my project work. I would like volunteer to help everyone else on their work. I would read about it in my free time. I would spend thousands of hours on consuming anything I could about programming. And that was great, and I loved it. But there just hits a point where you do it 24/7 for another company, and it just starts to become work. And there is a point where that passion is gone. Now, it's not gone forever. You can sort of still have to work on your own passion projects, and you can do other things. But just keep in mind, like, it's not just because you enjoy work of a certain kind, it's not always going to be fun. You have to accept the fact that sometime it'll take a toll.
Yeah. And definitely, like in a bigger environment, you can get idea fatigue because you have to just constantly, hey, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. The pace is insane, and that definitely eats away at your desire and passion, because you just have to keep coming up with stuff, and eventually you're just coming up with stuff. It's like, man, this is so half-hearted and half-assed. This isn't like truly representative of what something I would do, but I got to come up with something, and hopefully, as you make it, you can refine it and make it something that you really love. But yeah, like idea fatigue has hit me multiple times in my career, and it's sometimes hard to get out of that. And it can be pretty depressing, actually. You're working with Jason in the game that we first worked on. Again, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention this stuff, but at least the titles and stuff. But there was a moment when I was working, let me see, I think like almost 120-hour weeks or some crazy stuff. I wasn't going home. And my daughter was born. And then I was back at work like the next day. I was FaceTiming, my son was a year old, 3 months old. We had a design meeting one day, and I had been at work like nonstop for 36 hours working on something. And we had this big design meeting, and someone violated a rule, like a standard for like mount speed. and I just flipped out. Like I just screamed at the design team because I was so angry that I had been there so long and I'm working on this stuff, and someone just flippantly decides to just like break this standard rule that we had for our game. And I just flipped, and they were like, dude, you're done. Like you've worked way too much. And like that. And I realized that moment that I had put so much into this concept, and I'm, to your point, I'm working for someone else. And I wasn't seeing any more from it. And I just like, man, I got to chill. And I think I just ended up just like taking 3 days off and just sitting at home and just kind of trying to find myself again. It worked out just fine in the end. I'm also a professional in the end of it, but yeah, that type of stuff, it can be depressing. And I think the advantage of an indie studio shines there because you can kind of work at your own pace within reason, of course. You don't have that extra pressure of the constant schedule or anything like that.
Yeah, and if you've never felt that experience and know what we're talking about, if you've ever done a game jam, take those like 2 days of hyper focused pressure where you're constantly trying to get things done and you have a deadline, and make that 6 months, and then presume that your paycheck only works if you get the project successful. And ask yourself if that's the kind of stress you could see yourself living under for a long time. I worked on a project with one friend of mine, good friend, like I really like, we hang out all the time, but we finished one project and I said, I need to just not talk to you for 1 week. I just have to not like, just because he's on the design team and the stuff he was giving me was just this, like, make a thing that does X. It's like, give me some information. I can't reach into your brain. And it was so frustrating where he's like, we have a very sharp deadline and we need this thing, but you have to figure out all of my guesses of what I want. It's like, I can't do this and I can't deal with you right now. I need a break. so yeah, afterwards, I just did it that way.
He just hands you a design doc with the sentence, make it fun, done. Make something fun.
Yeah.
Fun game. I love the design docs are like 1 page. I still remember when I saw the first, saw the Vanguard design doc, the internal low-level design doc for the first time.
LODD, yeah.
And I went to the combat page, and I was like, okay, here's the first page of combat. I think it was page 117. And then it ended on page 118. And I was like, that was like classes and combat with the whole thing. I was like, oh.
This document was, I don't know, a good 600 pages long. It was huge, and it was mostly story. Like it was
almost all story.
Vanguard,
like
Vanguard had
lore.
Rich, deep story, and yeah, I mean, he's right. Like when I first got there, I remember like looking for combat and classes, and I think it was all of like 5 pages. But, I mean, in their defense, we did end up designing actual classes in combat after that. They were really focused on the history and the lore of the game and just some of the higher concepts of gameplay, trying to stick with the EverQuest theme. But yeah, it was pretty funny.
That was actually a question that came up a good while ago that we sort of skimmed over. So I thought it might be fun to bring it back now. Is somebody asked a question about they have a hard time mitigating that barrier between the designer giving them requirements and then them trying to make those things real, and they don't know how they say that they're not getting good enough requirements effectively. And they were asking, it's like, should there be a person in between? And so I'd be curious to see what everyone's thoughts are on that relationship between those two competing objectives.
So you're talking about the relationship between a designer and a programmer, basically.
Yeah.
Right. So I assume this is not the leads, right? This is probably just like a programmer and a designer on the team.
Yeah, assuming most people are talking from an indie-ish perspective, yeah, it's probably more of a, there's not a giant hierarchy. It's just the 2 people who are working together, probably.
I mean, if it's that close of an environment, I mean, sometimes those 2 people just need to go out, grab a beer, and just talk it out. I mean, as a game designer, you got to learn to speak a language of other disciplines. I mean, it's just a must if you want to make something successful and have a good relationship. You can't just throw something over a fence. You can't assume that someone can think like you or can translate what's in your brain because it's your brain. Language exists for a reason. Have some respect for the other discipline, and just even if it's just a bulleted list or I mean, if a designer isn't giving you what you want, go to a designer, sit down with them, and just say, hey, I know this is the thing that you want to do. This is the end goal, but tell me how to get here. Help me out here. You also have to have, you may have to swallow your pride a little bit. Some people won't do that because they want to feel stupid or be viewed as dumb because they asked a question of someone. But just be humble. Go talk to them. Like I said, break bread over something. Have a beer. Go take a walk, and just talk about it. If it's just unmanageable or untenable, then that's just some personal stuff that needs to be handled in some other way, and people just aren't being professional at that point. But yeah, I mean, a good game design doc is pretty easy to write. You have to learn how to speak a language. I learned a long time ago that when you're writing a game design doc, you're writing for three people. You're writing for designers, you're writing for software, and you're writing for production. You gotta have speech in there so the producer can read the design doc and just read the parts he wants to read and understand it, because they're not going to read the low level stuff. They're not going to understand any of that stuff, and you don't want them trying to represent the low level stuff to anyone in the public because they will not say it correctly. But then then your programmer needs to be able to understand the low level stuff. He's going to eat all that up and get it. And I'm not leaving out artists here. The low level stuff is also for art. You have to explain what you want to see. You have to try to give visual examples of that stuff. And then for a designer, it's just you have to be able to read it yourself and like, okay, I understand what I wanted to do here. So like I've learned that basically when you write a design doc, you're almost writing in triplicate. User stories, things like that are super useful. A user story can be huge for anyone who is reading your document. So if a designer's not giving you what you want, maybe just ask them for a user story, because that's also a test to them.
I love user stories. They're my favorite thing to get. In fact, I think like I'll say this specifically to the programmers out there, because this is like this relationship I'm very, very familiar with, more so from contracting. So let's not specific game design doc, but let's just say design doc in general. Usually when you're working with any client, usually a product owner, they want a thing to exist, but they have no understanding of what the technology is or how it works. And I used to be that guy. I've said this before on a video on Charles's channel, is that I used to be sort of, my job is the IT guy. So I take out a piece of paper and it's like, I will mechanically write down the rules and I will make the exact system you give me. And if you give me the wrong specs, tough shit. That's your fault, not mine. You messed up. And it took me so long in my career to realize what a just asshole move that is, right? That's me trying to like stamp my feet in the ground and say, this is my line, this is your line. And it's so unnecessary. And it's much better to stop and go, they're like trying to communicate something to you. They may be bad at it, but you're being bad at listening. And it's much more important to try to get to the meat of what they're trying to do. And so now I consider that the personal challenge, right? The truth is maybe there should be somebody in some cases to do that with you, but truth is there won't always. And so it's better for you to learn how to do that job. And the way to do that is to just actually engage with the person and try not to listen to the words they say too much, because again, designers will try to bridge the gap with you and they'll try to use technical language and they'll do it wrong. And if you take that verbatim, you'll probably write it down wrong. Instead, you want to talk to them and try to like get them to explain what it feels or what it looks like or how it interacts. And if you can get on the same page with them from a design perspective, you know how to translate that yourself into something that's practical from a code perspective. So just like honestly try to engage, like try to find what they're actually saying, not what they're literally saying. And if you do that, your entire relationship to designers will be so much smoother. You have no idea.
One of the most powerful things you can do to a designer when they're trying to explain the design to you is you ask them why. Well, why are we doing it this way? What's the goal here? What is this meant to accomplish? How does the player see this? Like it challenges the designer to explain it too, because sometimes the designer is just kind of stream of consciousness, just throwing something out there, and they haven't considered all of the aspects of it. Because it's just, like I said earlier, it's rubber ducking. I'm just throwing an idea out, and I want you to actually ask me these questions because that's the essence of it. So, I mean, just you shouldn't be afraid to ask a designer. Designer is not the end all be all of anything when it comes to development. We are just a part of the big machine. And if a designer can't accept that, then I don't know, maybe maybe they are the end all be all somehow, some way.
It might come down to just how they're asking questions too. I feel like when you're asking the designer questions, you're gonna make sure that like they realize you're not cutting down or criticizing the idea.
Yes.
It's much more about trying to understand all of the details, because like when you think about a thing and explain it, it's very easy to like picture this one little edge case thing or these other things that are going on in the background without saying them out loud. It's really about like trying to tease out every single detail so that it can kind of account for that. And I thought it was great what Jason said about finding out what they really want to, because I don't know how many times I've had designers come at me with like, here's what I want. And then I'm like, okay, well, we'll think about it for a little while. I'll start asking them why they want it. And it's really just like supposed to be a hack to solve some other totally unrelated problem that's like a simple 2-line bug fix. We just go fix the bug, make it easy for them, or we could come up with some better solution or something. So you really want to find out what it is they're trying to accomplish. And
if you're creating something, here's the dirty little secret a lot of people don't realize is what's really going on. You're trying to get the exact, like down to the lines of code details out of what they're saying. But the thing is, what they're actually secretly saying is they're not giving you enough details, but it's not by accident. What they're doing is they're saying, I'll know it when I see it. And they're not telling you that, but that's what they're thinking. They're like, I don't know the answer yet. I want to see different things. And you're going, I want an exact thing so I can make it. And that disconnect is going to always be there. And if you treat that as a frustration that they're not giving you enough information, then you're going to always be fighting. Like, you're much better off looking at it as going, I respect the fact that I like, just switch roles just once. Ask yourself, if you're designing something, do you know exactly everything about it the first time? Obviously not. So if you respect how hard it is to come up with an ongoing idea until it's correct, you have to kind of give some leeway in your design. So sometimes I will program something knowing full well it's probably not going to stay that way because they're going to make changes. And I don't see that as them giving me the wrong information. I see it as an ongoing process to get to where the right answer is. So you just have to accept sometimes it's a work in progress.
And I think like doing game development is a game in itself, right? It's, it's about managing egos, and this goes back to the concept I was saying about sociology and psychology. Like, it's not just about your customer, it is about the people you're working with too. And I mean, this is true in any professional environment. You have a lot of personalities you're dealing with. You have to learn these people, and you have to learn how to interact with them. So you're going to be putting on different personalities yourself, because if you respect them on a professional level and you both have the same goal of producing something great, then you have to learn how to work together. So, like I said, like one person, it's a walk. Another person, it's beer. Another person, it's just asking them how their family's doing. It's all these kind of weird personal things, because you're just managing egos. And you have to also understand what your ego is and what you are able to do and how far you're able to go out your comfort zone to facilitate a relationship with people you're working with. Because I mean, you're all in the trenches together. You're all going after the same thing. And if you can't communicate well, then man, it's horrible for everybody. It is just not fun. And I'm saying it this way because I have experienced bad communication environment with big things, and it is just not great. It ends up just being horrible for you personally, professionally, and it can be really bad for your product and your studio.
Yeah, I think that's communication breakdown is kind of what kills projects a lot of the time. Just people stop communicating, or they get problems with it. I think that's one of the things my friend Chris talks about a lot too. He's really good at keeping communication good with his teams and stuff. And just keeping productivity up.
Safety.
Just being able to communicate with everybody and have it be a very non-hostile environment. By the way, questions now appear in chat again. I don't know. It's like Charles.
They've been for a while.
Stepped away for a second. Yeah, now they're up. People were asking. So I did this design thing yesterday. I don't know if I assume neither one of you guys saw it, but went through and did like a quick game design for what I wanted to do was a video on how to make a top-down 3D shooter for total beginners, like targeted at like a high school kid with no coding experience, opens up Unity, can pull down the assets, download the assets, and build out a simple top-down shooter, Smash TV style type thing. Here, let me see if I can share this in a way
But
that
you might need a more up-to-date reference. I don't know how much of the audience knows Smash TV.
I know that's just so old, right? But that was my my template for it. So here, let me see if I can get this in a way
if you haven't played Smash TV, play it. It's good stuff. Good stuff.
So anyway, my overall game design was trying to show people just a way to throw together something somewhat simple in like an hour. Without writing it out as a doc, because what I'd normally do is just write it on paper, and I'd have notebooks full of crap and be moving it around. And this is like my new obsession with building them in here. So I just wanted to run it right by you guys real quick and just get some tear down on my terrible design. So the general mechanics would be like you start down in the middle of some big open area. Bad guys run at you, and you'll explore, go pick up power-ups, or go pick up health packs and shoot bad guys until you die. Pretty much the entire thing, right? An archery system. What's that?
Where's bullet trees?
No, there aren't bullet trees though. So maybe we could add bullet trees to the list. I had dragons instead though. So the player was going to be this little archer chick from Mixamo. She looks like, I don't know, she'll just run around, shoot bow and arrow, like whatever direction. I don't know, however you shoot a bow and arrow. Whatever direction you're facing, and then run with WASD. And then I designed my couple enemies. So I was going to do one of these things as a dragon, just make it kind of like stationary, standing still, shooting fireballs. One of my ideas was a plant that shoots missiles. So
there you go.
I went with a dragon because it seemed a little bit easier than finding a bullet tree or a missile shooting plant. But yeah, I think I was gonna go with this as a free one. And then I got my knight dude that'll just run in and swing and attack with slow damage. And then this ram dude I was thinking would kind of like run head first at the players and like try to run into them. And that's how it attacks. So I'd have 3 different ways to attack that I'm teaching. This might be like way overkill for a beginner video. I'm not completely sure, but I figured like 3 different types of enemies, and then this was my development plan. So one of the things I was trying to do was build out like an actual plan for how, if I was developing this game, the order that I would develop the things in, the order that I would put the systems together in, and that it would feel natural to me. So this was my list, and I kind of wanted to run this part by you guys and see I don't know what other shit I missed, what things I should think about, what feedback you have, or anything, or we could just say like Jason's design sucks and that's it. So anyway, we just do some world building. Then I was thinking I'd go into the player movement stuff and just kind of detail out like the different things for player movement. Like I want WASD stuff. I want to make him kind of follow along with the nav mesh, aim with the mouse, go in directions. Not actually use an agent though for the thing. Just kind of writing notes. And then I wrote out essentially the classes that I imagine that I'll probably use for it. Like some sort of movement class that aims and does handling, and one that does animation. Right. And then I go on to like my enemies. Same kind of thing. Like I think that each one of these will have a separate attack class, but that's probably about it. And then this is kind of like the key functionality or features of my enemy system that I'll put together. Then I'll move on to player and enemy health, since it'd be shared, and like the one class for that, and then go on to UI development so I can hook that up and handle death, bows, so I can actually shoot the bad guys, scoring, and UI again to dive back into like UI scoring stuff, and then some sort of magic stuff and health things. Yeah, anyway, that's kind of like my plan.
Sort of restarting thing at the end. I usually make sure to have a general way to control the menu at the end, unless you're counting that in UI is like the restarting and all that.
Oh yeah, the full.
I was thinking it would just go until you died and then restart.
Oh, that's fine. Just because I often find that there's a lot of game jam games where sometimes they'll just end, and even just having a simple restart button that just reloads the scene is one of those like minimum things I like.
That's not a bad idea. Let's do that. So let's do a end game / restart screen. Yeah, that makes sense, because then it can do show like the high score right there and show how to do. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a scene. It can just be a panel or something to pop up. I just didn't want to get
some indication.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
The only other thing that I think I do differently is that you've got this very systemically broken up into units of work, like features that are going to be built one on top of another. And while I probably do the same thing, I find that if you think systemically, it's a lot harder to give yourself a metric for how successful your path has gone. Like, how far along am I? How much work have I got done? So what I usually do is, on top of this, I would have like a little checkbox of the equivalent of user stories or some similar approach, where I would phrase it as a thing I wish my game could do. Like, I want to be able to walk around. I want to be able to click a place and see the character walk to a location and, whatever. I want my enemy to attack, whatever, and kind of see it. It's exactly the same thing. It's the same information. But if you do it that way, you can check these off as the system now supports those features. And it gives you that great sense of, cool, my game can do these things now,
Right. So you're just kind of writing it out as a more of like a story list. Makes sense.
Exactly. It's kind of like how a person would experience the game. It's like they will run around, they will restart it, they will attack an enemy. And once I can say that, I can say my game can support movement and combat and all this stuff. So again, same thing, but just from that perspective.
Right.
So this is my systems design. So this was how I was thinking I will tie together all of my classes and stuff. So since it's a relatively simple game, a lot of things just kind of tie into the health of the entities, like the player and NPC. So I have like a health on everything, a health bar that's linked up to just the player, a player death script, so it'll handle like when the player dies. It'll probably just pop up that other screen and like the end game screen. And then on enemy death, I was thinking what I'll do is have another script there that just fires off a Unity event for when they die, so that I can do a variety of different things. I can either play an animation, play a death particle. On all of them, I think what I'll do is just add some score through that Unity event instead of adding another script there. Mostly just to keep it generic and relatively simple, because it is supposed to be a tutorial. And then the score controller part would just have, it would be hooked in through the Unity event there, but then it'll hook up to a UI element that does the score. And then down here's my projectiles that reference health, and two things that launch projectiles that reference projectile. That's kind of like the entire the chain of references for my game, and pretty much all the classes and all the code to handle this. I mean, there's probably a little bit more abstracted away, like player movement, but that's not really attached to anything in my code, at least. Right.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as how I would structure it. The only thing that's not here that I would see I like to have a facade pattern of some kind, so that there's like a player, and so rather than talking to the health system to avoid sort of having issues with too much leaking of implementation, I normally like player, and I would do all of the stuff against the player class, and it would use the services and systems inside of it. That's probably beyond the scope of this like graph anyway, but that's just the only thing that is different from here.
Right. That's just and the only reason I wouldn't do that in here is because it's just beyond the scope of the game, because all the player has is health. They're just not going to have anything else that's not independent. The bow is just auto firing every refresh, and it's just health. Otherwise, I mean, the health could almost be player, but then I wouldn't be able to reuse it for the enemies. I don't know. That was the entirety of my design. Saleem, did I ever show you this thing? This tool?
What?
This Milanote thing?
You've mentioned it before, yeah.
So the game design. So I like to just hit this one. Go to like game design document, and like pretend that I just made a beautiful game design. It's all done. Look at my design, Saleem.
I think this is what I sent to my producer to check out.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's definitely neat for building these things, and it's got like the you can do like the planners for like weekly planners or personal ones. I've been using the weekly one and the Kanban board thing in here a lot. So
I haven't really been playing with the templates. I really should. I've just been like making boards and things for my own stuff. So
I mostly just use the default ones, but every like day or two, I'll come through and just kind of pop and look at them again. Like, I wonder if any of these will fit.
Who was that?
That's what I was looking for.
I need to check this. Check this out more. My next design doc that I have to write.
Yeah, I just like it because it's super interactive. Like I can bounce around and like go look at pictures. I can put links in and stuff, which I didn't know until I accidentally did it yesterday. So you add a link and it just pops it up as like this full embedded thing. I just pasted in a link. So
yeah, like I said, I did that for all of the content I've done across YouTube, because it's hard to keep track of all the various different other people's channels I've done some interview or some video with. So I just made one for myself that, because you can have these nested containers, it was really cool to
that's
say
cool.
content I've done per channel.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, cool stuff. Let's see. Were there any other questions that popped up? A couple people made their own boards.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. There was a question for Salim. Hold on.
Nope.
Hit that one.
No questions from me.
As a designer whose art is also limited to circles, boxes, and the occasional rhomboid, how do you find artists for graphics and animation? I've been wearing all the hats for a long time.
Ooh. I've been working in the big industry for long enough that I don't generally have to worry about this. But when I did work with Jason, I mean, we just, how do we find who was that dude we worked with? The dude that came on just before the studio closed.
I don't remember how we found him, but
we found through Unity network stuff, right?
Probably, yeah, through the Unity forums. The Unity forums are a pretty good place. I also always recommend Upwork and Fiverr. Those and ArtStation, but Upwork and Fiverr are great for finding artists. You don't expect to hit a home run like your first one, like anybody can get on there. So you might put out 4 requests and get one that you really like back, but then you'll know like that's the one person. Just keep going back to that person or something. So I would say use some of those sites and try a variety of people. Keep the price point low at first. You'll eventually find somebody who can do really nice stuff at a price you can afford. But I would try a couple. Go ahead, Jason.
There's a video that it's actually kind of very tangentially related, but it will give you a really good answer to your question. There's a YouTube channel called Nerd City, and they do a whole load of mostly meme content. But one thing they do, which is really great, is they had a multi-part series on making channel merch for their YouTube channel. In other words, how do you find a creator to do art relative to your content and your channel? And while that's not technically the same thing, they cover effectively the task of how do I find an artist? How do I respect the process? How do I find someone who's got art that I like? How do I deal with paying them, and how much do they expect? And do I pay up front? Do I pay this, that, and the other? So if you check out Nerd City's YouTube channel, their video will kind of guide you through the process of just finding an artist to work with, and that'll help you a lot as an indie. Obviously, there's a different scale if you're talking about what Jason's talking about, where it's like hiring a full-time modeler for your project is very different. But if you're just looking to get some work done for your game, check out that video, which should kind of guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, I think we found for Mighty Monster Mayhem. Was that I think it was Upwork. We got a bunch of that. We got those creatures all modeled out and stuff, right?
Yeah, and I mean you can get good character art for around $100 for a good character, and probably less. I mean, just depending on where you go. But also the best thing is just jump onto the asset store. If the art doesn't need to be specific to a thing, like just use pre-made art until you've got your game done and ready, and then start going from there. Start replacing things and upgrading it as you get progress. I just say don't like sit there and wait to make a game because you don't have the right art. Start making the game and then put the art in.
The other option is to just make the baddest game that uses circles, boxes, and rhomboids. I mean, bam. Just do that.
Do that
really games, like if you look at Portal, man, Portal is a famous game for its visuals, but if you actually take a screenshot of that game, there is a lot of rectangles. Like it's a very, very clean lined game.
Yes. I mean, look at Minecraft. It's yeah.
I will say though, one thing designer friends of mine have said as a piece of advice: if you're not in that world and you're looking to hire somebody, one of the worst things you can do is hire a designer who doesn't do the kind of design you want, and then try to expect them to make something they're not good at, and then get angry at them when they don't produce it. So one of the best things you can do is check out person's portfolio and find somebody who provably does the kind of stuff you like. You're doing yourself and them a disservice if you hire somebody who's not proven to do the kind of stuff that you already know you kind of like.
Yeah, and that's when you're on Fiverr and Upwork, you should be looking at everybody's things. Like go through and you want to find people and say like, hey, they did a thing that already looks like it. If you see they did a bunch of cool characters and you want Jeeps and tanks made, you're making a stupid decision because totally different skill. Loosely related, but not the same.
People.
Like vehicles, characters, environment, animators and particles are different too. Like it's all. Don't expect your beautiful 2D concept artist to make you great 3D models, and
much like all designers can't do the same things, all artists can't do the same things. There's all sub-disciplines and all that stuff.
All designers can do everything. They draw art and they make games. That's right, and they code up the game.
Yes.
There was
every programmer can fix a computer and fix your VCR and do everything else as well because it's all the same thing, right? It's just a computer, so
it's all just electronics. Yep.
You do computers fix it. Speaking of just doing computers, though, there was a question about using an iMac versus PC for 3D MMO development on your. I think it's more just applies to like an iMac versus a PC for any game development. If there are any limitations, I don't personally know. I thought iMacs were like dead and old, so I would assume that the biggest limitation is that they're just slow. I thought that was like a model that they had killed like a long time ago. I don't know. Maybe they brought it back. The iMac version. I thought that was like I don't know. As you can tell, I don't
specifically saying iMac, or does he just mean Mac in general, or does he?
I don't know. It says iMac in front of it, but if it's just Mac versus PC, I mean, there's no real technical limitations. The biggest thing is just going to be performance. You might run into some specific library stuff that doesn't work for your MMO, or your server may not run right. But most of the time with an MMO, you're going to want to run your server in Linux anyway, so it should probably be compatible with Mac, and you might actually have some benefits there. The biggest thing, though, I think is just going to be performance, because getting the same performance as a PC is going to cost you a whole lot more on the Mac.
He said he just meant Mac in general.
Okay.
So the only thing I would say as a caution, if you're doing a lot of development work, is that again, you could work in anything. It's one of these things that there's not like the right machine. There's the machine. Whatever tool you have to do whatever art you can do it, or whatever you're making. It doesn't matter. You can use anything. The one thing is that when you're building a project, it's harder to build a project for Mac on a PC. there's certain rules and restrictions in terms of having to with the build pipeline of how it works. So you have to do some weird stuff. I don't want to like bog it down with like getting the ID code and having a device and other stuff, but just trust me, if you're deploying to a Mac, you either need to have one yourself, or use some other virtualization stuff, or use a virtual cloud build or something. Like, it's not as easy from that perspective, but that's the only real limitation, is that it's harder.
And that's really going the other way, right? That's just if they want to do Mac stuff. This is more building. I mean, a 3D MMO is probably not going to have a Mac build realistically. So they're building PC stuff on a Mac, and there's really no limitation there, right?
Not that I know.
You know what you're saying? So the limitation is only kind of going the other way. So if you want the ability to do the Mac stuff, the Mac is a better option.
Yeah.
So there is a question in here for Jason that makes me smile.
Which one's that?
Good luck for you. This one. I'm not answering this one.
The UE4.
Unreal 4 is better than Unity, and you can use C++. I switched from Unity to Unreal. Why don't you use Unreal? Well, I mean,
we've had this question so many times.
I get it all. It's a common question, right? Like, I think that Unreal is definitely better at some things, and it probably always will be. I think that Unity is still better at some things, and probably always will be. I personally like C# more than I like C++ by quite a bit. In fact, I don't particularly like C++ anymore, just because it's been so long since I've used it. I feel like it just feels tedious and like extra work, like it's slowing me down. But Unreal has a lot of cool benefits to it too. The main reason I don't switch to using it, though, is that there's just no driving, motivating factor or benefit. If I was working at a company that was, working on a game that used Unreal, and that was our big project, I would switch over and focus a lot more on Unreal, but that's not happening. So there's just not there's no reason for me to switch. There's nothing that I would gain by switching. There's nothing that any game I've built, in the last however long would gain from switching from Unreal or switching from Unity to Unreal. I feel like a lot of time people see these beautiful tech demos from, like Epic or anybody else that makes these, great looking demos, and they think like, okay, if I switch to that, suddenly my game is going to be like that. And I've never had that experience, right? Like you can get the nice starting lighting and stuff looking great in Unreal or, by switching engines, but there's still all of the other work. And then you run into all of the technical side stuff on the back end where you're like, oh yeah, now I need to actually make this tech demo into a game. And suddenly it doesn't, I can't do any of these cool things, or a lot of them,
Yeah.
And better is totally subjective. There are plenty of studios that don't use Unreal or Unity. They use in-house engine, and it's just because it fits their needs. There are some studios that use engines that still use C, and they produce games that are just fine. It's just like whatever is good for the goose, good for the gander. Whatever works with what you're doing. If you know Unreal really well and Unreal is going to serve your purposes, then stick with that. If you like C++ over C#, then stick with that. I think I'm more in the park of C# over C++, but I dig both. So yeah, I mean, I don't think you can just say that Unreal is better than Unity as just a general thing. It is definitely situational, because there are some in-house engines that you would argue are better than Unreal, but they're better than Unreal for the specific game or series of games that they're making. So yeah, I mean, it's all situational.
Yeah, honestly, I just hate these kinds of questions. They're just so pointless and unproductive. Like there is the IT industry is so full of this nonsense of PHP is better than this other language, or
PHP is not better than anything.
Yeah, well, it's all different conversation. You've got people who like certain languages are better. Other people saying, "Oh, Blender's trash because it's free. You should be using Max or whatever."
Oh God, yeah.
These are so dumb, just stupid statements, because you can find people who can make amazing things in literally anything. Like you see these videos on YouTube of people making like art out of nonsense, just like shavings of wood and stuff, and making gorgeous things. It doesn't matter. Like it's such a pointless argument to say this thing is better or this thing is worse. There is context and whatever subject you're in, and which thing you prefer, and which is more performant on which platform. Like there's so many reasons why you might pick one thing over another, that it's such a pointless argument to like put your stake in the ground and say this one's better. Like it every time I read it, it's like, which is better, a hammer or a screwdriver? It's like, that's such a dumb question. Like, what are you doing with it? Like, you can't just say objectively one thing is better. And like, I know people who use Unreal and they use it because they can't code, and they find that the Kismet stuff, well, it's not Kismet anymore. It's now the Blueprint system.
Yeah, Blueprint.
Yeah. They love that because it suits their workflow. And I've got other people I know who are like, we need multiple platforms, and the freedom to build on multiple platforms is our number one priority. Unity gives us that in a way nothing else does. Like, it really depends on what you're doing. And so it's pointless. Just learn your tools and use them well. Like, I don't know.
And if you're making an MMO, in both cases, you end up changing the engines completely because neither one of them supports an MMO natively.
Yeah, you're going to be doing a ton of custom work on either end, yeah. But yeah, I mean, though, you really should use whichever one is going to be best for your actual scenario and your team, right? Like, if your team has no allegiance or experience with either, then use whichever one is going to be best suited for the type of game that you're building, right? If you're going to build a mobile game, I would probably go with Unity by default. If you're going to build an FPS, like it's kind of built into Unreal, maybe start there. And just based on that,
you get people who've never made a game before, and they're like, "Oh, well, all my favorite games are made in Unreal, so Unreal is the better engine." It's like, well, the most important decision you need to make when you're making your first game and picking what engine is, how can I achieve it? And the truth is, you have to take into account how much resources are available for you online, what support you can get, how easy is the engine to learn and use. And the amount of times you see somebody who's never made a game, never worked with either engine, and like, spoiler alert, most of us here have worked with multiple engines, and it's like people are saying, well, that one's objectively better. It's like, well, not for you who's never made a game. Maybe you should work with something that's got more YouTube tutorials and like better resources, and work with the thing that makes your life easier to get your game made. Don't just pick the engine that, well, that's the one AAA studios make. It's like, if you buy the world's best guitar, you're not going to suddenly be able to play guitar. It doesn't work like that. You have to like pick anything and learn on the tools you have.
Yeah, and if you're making a project, you should be researching what's best. I mean, you have to make contextually the best decision for your idea. And like you said, first-person shooter, UE is probably a better bet, because there's going to be plenty of examples out there that you can look at and take from. But
there's a networking system that works. There's a network library there. Examples like you can
fail so bad on.
Like they're way ahead on that end. Yeah. Okay, I'll kill that question though. I think, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a good one though.
I just thought it was funny because we've talked about it so much.
No, I think it's good.
It's one of the most comments I get, right? So
it gets asked all the time.
We did a video on Charles's channel, and this is so frustrating. We did a video that says, which engine do you think is better? And I said, I'm going to put a stance. I'm going to say right now. I should have said right now. I didn't back then. I said Unity is better because it's better for beginners. It's got, easier to build multiple platforms, blah, blah, blah. And that was my stance, really. It was more, I think it's a better engine right now. And then a few months later, Unity comes out with this shiny new, better graphics thing. And now, literally every month, I get comments on that old video that's now like 9 months old going, do you know there's a new version of Unity? Said, yes, I've probably heard of it in the last 6 months. And it says, well, what do you think now? It's like, that's such a silly argument.
It means you need to do another video, Jason. That's the problem. You need to be releasing regular videos, updating.
I'm going to clip this content and it'll be my first video. Just leave me alone. I don't have this question.
Oh, hang on, Jason. I just got this thing. It just, there's a new version of Unity out. Or Unreal, sorry. The new version of Unreal out.
I need to have like a thing I can paste as like a repeated, the new version of whatever. Just like leave it there as a default.
Oh man, I popped up another question. My answer to this one was just none. I figured I would see if you had anything. I assume yours is kind of none too. There's one other question I want to jump onto after this, but just what architecture or pattern to use when developing games? Like starting out, I don't start with anything by default, and it's all 100% based on what the project is going to be. If it's a project where
it's the same question, it's the same question.
Same kind of
which
thing.
Tool do you use? It's like the answer is you don't use the you don't use the X-shaped pattern. Like if you're building, again, I love the Bob Martin version of this. If you're building a church, you start with a church-shaped architecture. You don't start with the the whatever. Like it's silly. Like you build the game you want to make by structuring it out for what you need. These patterns are just like, these are enterprise level patterns for building reliably consistent, identically shaped systems. Like they're not for games like this. If your game needs, like, perfect example, Jason's example with the graph, he had features he wanted, he made a bunch of features and systems, and that's not a named architecture. That's the architecture his game needs for the thing he is making. Don't just pick one of these things and put it in. If your game grows to the point that it needs service location and architectures because you're doing something that has a lot of third-party stuff, sure, but use these tools to like fit the job. It's like if you start with this, it's like you pick up a fork because you want to be able to eat your food and you get soup, right? You don't eat soup with a fork. You pick the tool for the job. You don't start with a tool and then hope the job is the right one to match the tool, right? It doesn't work like that.
Oh, if it's chunky
I
soup.
think that makes sense. I used to do that though. I mean, I used to create like default templates for my projects and start using them as a basis. But what I found was that it never really worked well for the second or third project because there was always a big variety of difference, and I'd start kind of pigeonholing myself into a mess by doing that. Essentially, by forcing myself to start with something, especially when it came to games, and I wasn't just making a repeatable web service or web page.
And
none for me.
If you lock yourself into one thing, then you're also like literally just locking yourself out from learning or discovering something else. If you want to get into the industry and certain things, that you're basically saying, I know this one thing, I don't know this other thing because I just thought that this was better. I didn't want to explore this other thing. So it's worthwhile to just be versatile and research and just experience everything as much as you can.
And that may sound cool at first, being like an expert in one thing, because I think we've all at one stage in our career been known as the guy that does X. And the problem is, after a while, it gets fatiguing, right? Because you don't get to learn anything new. You're the most fun you'll ever have in your career, no matter what you're doing, is being like third best. You always want to have someone better than you to learn from and have some cool stuff they can show you. And so you never want to be put in that position where you're stuck as like the guy everyone goes to, because you'll never get to improve. So always pick new things and like learn stuff. And yeah, don't just like lock in on something.
So I popped up another question about portfolios. I feel like this one answered a lot, but I haven't answered it with Salim around, so I thought it would be kind of interesting. Which is just like, so a lot of people are junior developer, or they want to be junior developers, no experience. They want to put up a portfolio so that they can show off something to get into the industry. I always recommend that people, like, assuming they're programmers, right? They're able to write the code and build this little game. I always tell people, like, make a little portfolio project, something that people can play in a relatively quick period of time, try out and see if it's show that you're able to code, and it'll set you aside versus the other ones. What do you? I don't know. I guess the question was, should they do more of that? As many games as possible? Should they do some certificates or school? My recommendation is kind of always to do not a whole bunch of games in a portfolio, to just preview and show like one really good one, or maybe two at most. But you should build a lot of them as you're building up the practice and stuff. Just don't show them all. Show and put forward only like the best of the best, and polish the shit out of that best thing. I don't know what it's like on the design perspective and all the just your thoughts on it, man.
I mean, obviously I didn't go to school. I mean, I served in the military and then got into games. So for me, it's all been hands-on. So I like the value of just doing the thing is huge to me. As far as like, getting a job or anything like that, like being able to show off, hey, here's a game design idea I had, and here is it implemented. Being able to show that off shows versatility, shows willingness, shows desire, shows passion. Like it shows many things, going back to Jason's earlier example in Half-Life of, this one moment in the game, the body language giving you this whole story. Seeing a game designer have a personal portfolio where he's just done, he from inception or concept to deliverable, he prototyped this thing out. That shows so much about that person's character and his willingness and desire, versus a certificate, where a certificate could be viewed by some as just, you basically just filled in a bunch of boxes or just met the minimum requirements to do this thing. Being a creative, when you can express that you really want to do this by just taking on all of this, certainly as a game designer, because game design is it's a really elaborate or broad term. Like being able to take on, especially considering things are so accessible now. I grabbed Unity and I did this thing. Like I learned how to, in that process, I not only learned how to prototype or create a game or a game concept, I taught myself how to use an engine. I taught myself potentially how to code. I taught myself potentially how to find art that was relevant or to make art myself. I'm showing you that I did all this in one example in a portfolio. Whether there should be a lot or a little, it really I think it just depends on how quickly you get something or how many ideas you have that you can execute on. Even if the idea is like the greatest idea in the world, it's just about the execution and the fact that you were willing to do it and you pulled it off to a degree. I think that it's way more valuable. When I'm interviewing people, the resume doesn't mean a whole lot to me. It's just something that it gives me talking points to drill deeper into them. And then how they react or respond to those things is what determines whether it was just something that they just happened to be a part of and they could put it on their resume, or something they were really passionate about. If they can show me a portfolio of this, that, and the other, they have a link to something that helps. But it really is, if I can point to a thing in a portfolio and say, oh man, like this is fantastic, how'd you go about this? And they start speaking about it and super passionate about it, then you know what? then to me, you're a game designer. Like you truly want to do this versus just, I just picked up a thing and I just thought it might be cool, and I saw someone else do it and just do it together. Like that whole response and interaction tells a lot. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't go to school. I value education. I recently got a chance to work with someone who's fresh out of college, out of game design college, and came as a game designer. And I love this dude so much because he's actually taught me. I'm going on 45 in a couple of weeks. He's a 25-year-old kid, and he's taught me some things and made me step back as a game designer and reconsider and rethink about how I do some stuff. And it's all because of the academic side of things, which I haven't had this, personal investment in as far as game design goes. So I think both of them are super valuable, but it does come down to your personal passion and how you want to express that. A certificate is just a check, a check in a box. I think that showing that you can be creative and branch out and your willingness is like hugely important, because experience is huge. It means so much when it comes to getting an industry, especially if you're getting a job somewhere that's established. You can hit the ground running. It shows that you can be thrown in the fire. It just means a lot from my point of view.
I agree. Like, to me, the most important keyword you said there is passion, 100%. And I think a lot of these questions are kind of intuitively obvious once you've done them once. The first time you've ever had to hire someone. So just reverse the role, right? You're somebody who's been given 100 resumes dumped on your desk. What are you actually looking for? Do you care about a list of buzzwords about various courses and technologies? Probably not. What you're looking for is, you're trying to ask the question, do I want to work with this person? And how do I know if I want to work with this person? Well, are they going to be someone who will work hard? Do they enjoy what they're doing? Are they going to be fun? And like, do they look like they have ideas that would gel with what you're doing? And so the way I would look at it from presenting yourself in a CV or a resume is, I don't need to see everything you've ever done. If there was 100 resumes and they all have every project every person there has ever done, I'm not going to read that. You wouldn't read that. But what you will do is you're going to look for a representative example of what they can do. And so you're going to want to see the best thing that they're proud of, or the best couple of things. And then beyond that, they want to see that you are passionate about the topic and that you've gone above and beyond in certain areas. What I look for is, do they look like they care about the subject? Do they look like there's someone doing their own homework on the side, or are they just hitting the exact minimum requirement? And so I often find one or two passion projects far outweighs anything else. And so the unfortunate answer is, should you do lots of games or should you have one or two? Well, the truth is, you have to do lots of games to learn and get passionate, but then you only present the stuff that is the one or two that's particularly valuable. So yeah, it depends what your objective is. Put yourself in the role of the other person and ask yourself, who would you want to hire? And can you become that kind of person?
And one thing that shouldn't get glossed over from a game designer standpoint, is you should play games. Like, you should play a lot of games. When I talk about experience, like, my hands-on experience is just a lot of video games. Like, making games, like I said, isn't easy. It's a serious job. And the thing that helps you get good is seeing and experiencing all the things that all these other great people have done in the industry, indie, AAA, whatever. There are so many great ideas and great execution on these ideas that can feed and just build a passion in you. If you love playing games and you want to make them, like, you just play more games and learn to recreate or take from the examples the moments that you remember in games. You want to make those again. You want to let someone else experience that stuff, because that's what you're doing it for. The passion, the desire, the drive. It all part and parcel with that.
Yeah, I think people that play, if you don't play a lot of games, it's hard to be a good game designer. Which is probably why I don't think I'm a very good game designer, because I play a lot of games, but I don't play a wide enough variety of games. I play a lot of the same games over and over. I feel like you get really good at it because you got, on top of the experience, you got wide exposure, know everything. And I don't know how many times I've come up with an idea and presented it, and to you or Lenny or anybody else, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's like these other 7 games that you never played. Like you're just trying to recreate a little tiny piece of what they did. Like, let me tell you the good version of it now. Like, so it's a huge difference. Playing lots of games is super important. I mean, yeah, obviously you got to do the work. You got to do both. And you got to play a variety of games, not just play. You just play Madden over and over, and that's all you played Madden nonstop. Right? You got to play everything. Try
in
it all out.
Some cases, you don't know that you really want to do something until you experience it in a game.
Yeah,
you see it and you're like, oh man, I think I actually want to try that.
But I would say as well, when it comes to playing games, there's a general concept with all creative work, which we're kind of affectionately calling doodling, which is where you can sit there and draw for 5 hours every day and never get better at drawing because you're putting zero effort and actually engaging in the process of getting better. You're doing it because it's fun and you're just messing around. And the same goes with any other creative work that you want to do yourself. If you play games, but you basically turn your brain off and just chill, you'll be playing games, but you're not learning anything. If you're engaging actively with the process and asking yourself, why did I enjoy this room? Why did I pick that door? You know, what is it in this space that is interesting to me? Or why did I find that challenge harder than this one? And you can start to see there's a map of ideas, you know? So you have to be actively engaged in the process if you're going to get anything out of it.
Yes. Analyzing, man, I got stories about that. Once I got in the industry, playing games is so different. Well, I mean, playing games, up to military time before I got into game reviews, they were just games. They were just fun, memorable moments. They were fantastic experiences. But then once I started doing game reviews and had to analyze them, I realized that how much stuff had stuck with me and how why these games were so significant and why I wanted to play them. And then of course that leads into understanding, just the human brain, and dopamine and just like the desire to keep doing and keep playing and keep going, and interaction and all that stuff, and immersion. So yeah, like you're right. Like it is. I mean, at that point, I was kind of turning my brain off because I was a kid, but then as an adult, I realized, oh man, these moments stuck with me, and here's why. Like now I realize this. And I see this in modern games, why they're doing this. So the foundation of the games that I was playing in modern day games, all these examples are totally valid. And now, I apply them when it comes to game design.
And the thing is, a lot of people don't realize this, but whenever you have something in a game that stuck with you, like this is an industry, right? It's not just a random thing. And so what you might be surprised to find is there is like names for this stuff. There is there is names for affordances and flow, and like there's even we talked before about how games with story and that kind of thing. I always love that quote that games is the ultimate art because it encompasses all other form of art. There's drawing, there's music, there's sound, there's story, there's all this stuff. And so the complexities of stuff to do in it is massive. And so whenever you're looking this stuff up, there's keywords to search for. There's books on these topics. So if you're looking at something and going, why did I pick that door instead of that door? You can go off and look at it and go, oh, well, it's called affordances. That's what that is. There's a certain indicator that someone put on that door that tells me that one is openable and that one isn't. And how did I know that from a distance? And so if you're into the topic, you can really engage with it academically. Like there's people have put hundreds and hundreds of hours into studying these things. So there is information out there that can really help you define, like architecture. I love that topic because people don't appreciate how the architecture of a room in a video game is designed. Like the position of the windows is specifically to cause sight lines with light that indicate certain things. And like there is so many things to learn with their own names, providing you're willing to take the time to go down the rabbit hole.
Framing of a scene or something like that is crazy. Convincing someone to walk down a path just using the environment. I mean, it goes back to visual storytelling. It's visual gameplay and visual direction. It's all diegetic interactions. I mean, they're huge. Not having to rely on a UI to tell people how to do stuff or interact or compel them to do it is huge. Like that. When that moment happens as a developer. When you just see someone's eyes light up or the light bulb here appear above their head and they end up doing the thing that you're just trying, like it's fantastic. It's hard to it's hard to beat that as far as like execution of a product, is to just get that when everything just comes together, and you mentioned we always talk about art, programming and game design. You brought up the other magic word, music, like the tone of a scene with sound. One of my favorite sounds in video games, and it's really weird, is footsteps. Like, I love a silent scene when I'm just kind of walking and hearing the footfalls and going over different materials, all this. For some reason, it really like resonates with me. Then you hit a hall where it's echoing and like kind of spooky. Like, it means it's such a small thing, but it just like it resonates with me a bunch. And it's why I love studios like or companies like Nintendo. Like, they nail sound so well. Like it's crazy. Even the freaking the shopping store music and all the little sounds, sounds that you made when you click stuff. You're just like, oh my god, I got to keep clicking and interacting with the store. Like it's nuts. But yeah, I'm tangent now, but like we do gloss over music a whole lot.
I always forget that sound and music even exist in games. So.
I mean, my daughter, funny enough, she's one of the things that she said she might want to do is make game music. And now when she told me that, I was like, oh my god, like you are the greatest daughter ever. Yeah,
that's why I didn't even list music in my jobs. I did that video on game dev jobs. Audio and music, audio engineer wasn't on the list.
We'll keep that in mind. Anybody out there who wants to go into it, that is a true fact all around. Most game companies, game design, music is always considered this thing you slap on afterwards. Very few companies take it as seriously as it should. And in fact, I love music to the point where I have a dedicated. Right here, I have a different pair of headphones for gaming because of the soundstage and how it affects the music. I take that stuff really seriously. Yeah. And one of my favorite examples is Overwatch. And you were talking about footsteps. If you haven't heard this, you'd love it. The thing about Overwatch is it's got a huge roster of characters, like whatever, 30 characters, 25 characters. Yep. And each one of them has a unique footstep sound, not just the surfaces they're on, but per character. So if you're familiar with the game and you've been playing it as long as I have, and you've got a good pair of headphones, I can close my eyes and I can say, there's the Junkrat character up there, the enemy team walking towards me. And the volume levels are different per character. So with just your ears, you can tell which character on which team is where, on which elevation, with which footstep sound. And if they're crouching, it muffles the sound. So I can tell there's a Reaper flanking me there, and there's a Tracer on our team over there. And then there's like all just from the soundscape. And it's fantastic. It's so cool to be able to just like,
such a subtle, great game design element. Now, the big question is, how intentional was that? Or was it like, hey, it's a cool different character. What are all the things that we can do to make we can make different footballs. All right, that's cool. And then it might have been kind of an emergent thing that it now is also a tactical advantage. So it'd be interesting to find out if that was actually like a goal or if it just kind of came out of it.
Well, they take their responsibility.
I'm deaf. You have an unfair advantage. All these other people can hear things I can't hear. It's cheating. That's why I always die.
Well, that's what I find is so funny, right? Like there's that one character, Reinhardt, big guy with a shield, and normally he stands in front of you, and the enemy team is like a big barrier. But if you get a really cheeky Reinhardt, he'll like find some high place, and he'll try to land behind you and slam a hammer into you. And I'll just be hearing, going, I can hear a Reinhardt, but I can't see one. And I look up and go, he's going to drop down and attack us in a second, and so I can back away because I'm paying attention, you know.
And you can hear it. It's unfair. I think that's discrimination against my deaf ass.
Wait, you
I did not mean to click on that question. How did you start your girls out in video games? I'm a dad with 2 girls.
You skipped over another question before that, but
that was an accident. I accidentally clicked on a question and popped one up. So how did you get your kids started playing video games?
I have a son and a daughter, and this is a fun story to tell. They're a year and 3 months apart, 4 months, I forget the difference between April and July. But my wife is, she's into games. Obviously, I am into games. You guys didn't realize. And so, games as a medium and an interaction and how important it is really showed itself when I was raising my kids. At one point, they were playing on the Wii. They were playing, I forget what Super Mario game it was. And my daughter, who really loves to read, my wife and I were sitting there talking, and I like stopped and I just said, hey, check it out. And there was a moment when my son was playing Mario and my daughter was reading from a strategy guide telling him how to play. And so she's looking in the guide and she's pointing at the screen and she's assisting him play this game. And in that moment, I'm like, this is why video games are so freaking awesome, right? Like my son and my daughter are young, and they are communicating with each other, and they are getting stimulus from a screen. And my son is reacting to the information he's getting from his sister. And so like at that moment, I'm like, yep, this is great. You know, I'm fine with my kids playing games. It's not going to turn them into evil people or make them dumb. You know, my daughter is a straight A student. She's basically spending her senior year in high school in college. My son is an AB student, who, you know, he's in higher tiers of math and stuff like that. Both my kids play video games like crazy. My son plays the hell out of Genshin Impact. He and I will probably be playing a bunch of Monster Hunter next week. You know, he's plays games, you know, till the wee hours of the night. And so as far as like just getting them into it, I made it a point to introduce my kids to older games. I am a huge Final Fantasy fan. My favorite game of all time is Final Fantasy VI. Tied with first is Chrono Trigger, another great SquareSoft game. And you know, reason Final Fantasy VI is my favorite is because it's storytelling wise and character development wise, a huge roster of characters, and every character you loved and you could relate to, even the Sasquatch. So I made it a point to introduce them to old games, you know, and you know, they can appreciate the older school thinking when it comes to games. You know, one of the things that I did is I introduced him to EverQuest, you know, one of the first MMOs, after they had played modern day MMOs. And, you know, I've had discussions with both of them about the idea of death penalties and stuff like that, and why it's so different nowadays. And like, instead of their reaction being, oh, well, that sucks, we actually had a huge discussion about what consequence means and accomplishment means when you have to put in a bunch of effort when you're investing in a character. And they 100% dig it. They completely understand it. You know, I think the oldest game my daughter played recently is Odin Sphere. I had her talk to her about the original Odin Sphere on PS2, which if you haven't played that, you should play it. It's done by the same team who did Dragon's Crown Vanillaware. But you know, she played that and she 100%, you know, gets into it. Then that just ends up being a gateway into other games. But also, you know, she's playing 2 instruments now. She likes music, so introducing her to older games and just their appreciation for music, along with the storytelling and the pacing, you know, it's just led her down this path that hopefully she sticks with. You know, if she ends up doing something else, and that's fine. But I know that at the core, her experience in games was huge. I'm not sure what my son's going to do yet. We'll see. I always hope that he'd become a game designer and we could just have like this cool like grant
games
history of game designers, and we just pass on the line.
Did John Romero start a studio with his son and they're making games now? That's pretty cool.
You just got to keep having more kids until you get like, I've got up to 5 now. One of them likes to code, so you're like
well, Joe is my nemesis.
Joe is coding. Yes, he's over there every day. I walk past him and he's writing code for something. He's now doing web development stuff and bots for Discord and all kinds of stuff. And he is ready to taunt you with tape ball. Don't worry.
No, I'm getting tape ball. That's mine.
Let me go grab him.
But yeah, so I mean, if you have 2 girls, like all I can say is, you know, I think at one point I bought I think a PSP at the time, and just let my son sit on the couch one day and play games. He was enjoying it. There was actually another point when I introduced my son to Final Fantasy 1 as a kid, and I mean, he couldn't read, but it was just a curiosity of if he could actually like manipulate menus and do stuff. And he ended up being able to go to a merchant and like buy stuff just from the cues. And this is an 8-bit Nintendo game where he was able to just get it just from the interaction eventually. So like to me, it's always been valuable for them to have that interaction. The video games weren't a babysitter for us. They were an interaction that our kids could do and have fun with us or without us. I've never had a problem with it, and I think it's good for parents to engage their kids and let them play video games.
Yeah, I think that's all. Yeah, accurate. I let them play pretty early on too, so I think it works out well. As long as you manage and maintain it, and watch the online
it
stuff.
all comes down to being a good parent, a good responsible parent. You get mad if you just are neglectful to your kids.
So there was one that Jason wanted to pop up. I wanted to share real quick.
Yeah, because I love this question. I love teaching. I love tutoring. I basically, anytime I see a programming question, I can't help but dive in and try to help.
And you want to read it out loud? The question?
Oh, yeah. So how can I improve my teaching skills for game development? Well, I would just say, how do I improve my teaching skills in general? It would be more of a better question, but it's...
And this is teaching kids specifically.
Yeah, well, I would even say I don't think there's as much of a delineation as people think, because, well, kids are creative and they will just jump on anything. Like they're willing to learn. They're voracious if you give them enough to lean on. I would say when you're teaching anybody anything, the number one thing that I think is missed is a lot of people try to teach something without grounding of why the other person should care. So I think the very first thing you should do whenever teaching anything, any topic, and I'm going to use programming as an example because it's something I do a lot, but you start with why do they care to learn? What is it they want to do? So if you're teaching a kid a game, you would say, do you want to make a game? If we do this, you will end up making a game. So you set that sort of, this is why we're doing this. And so when there's inevitable dips in sort of the boring technical stuff you have to cover, they've got an objective in mind that we're working our way towards this goal. And then once you've done that, it comes down to you start with this incremental step of, we want to do this thing. Here's how we do it. You do a small step, show the results, get the dopamine hit, successful, we did a thing, incremented, here's why we change it, and you scale it up that way. And that's just a general good practice, is you want to keep, people have low attention span, and they often forget why they're doing something if it's not for them. So if you engage people in the small step, the benefit of that too is the strong learners, the people who are going to drive ahead, will kind of see the pattern you're going for, and they will just start going ham in a different direction. And if like, I used to teach kids on Scratch. I don't know if you know Scratch. It's like a Lego block programming language thing. And you would start with, we'll just move this cat character around the screen, and you can click the mouse and whatever. And you'd be looking over, and some of the kids are like changing the cat's color and doing different stuff and doubling the speed values. And you're like, cool, I'm kind of stepping through what we're doing, but I'm giving you the leeway that if you're getting bored because I'm going too slowly, you can see the direction to sort of create it in a different way. So yeah, it's all about making learning fun by engaging with the process. And as a final note, if you're teaching somebody something more technical, so they're doing it one way and you're trying to teach them a new way, always validate the solution they have. This is something subtle that people miss as well. So if someone says, how should I architect my game code or whatever, you start with saying, here is our problem. We need an inventory full of items. Let's do it the simple way. This is how you're probably doing it, and say, that's fine. It's valid. It works. But here's what can go wrong. Here's how you make it better. So if you just jump to, this is the right answer, it puts you in this position of like, you're demeaning the work they've done, but you have to treat it as a step of educational improvement. So you validate that what they did makes sense with the knowledge they have, and then you propose new information and scale it up beyond that point. And it's you have to acknowledge the fact that you had to learn this too, and people often want to be reminded that you're learning as well, right? It's an ongoing process. So if you're willing to admit, I didn't understand this, I had to learn this, now I know it, I'm now telling you, and we can kind of learn together, it makes the whole process fun and engaging for everybody. So yeah, I take this topic particularly seriously. So
I have a follow-up question in regards to that, related to this. So so in that process, because everyone learns differently, do you have a method for learning how people learn? Because obviously that's going to help. That's going to inform how you interact with them, whether visual learners or whatever.
True. So what I do is I find that there's always a problem with teaching a group of people at once. And so if it's in that scenario, it's much harder. But what I do is I find I try to aim for more towards the slower people who are having trouble getting the concepts. And if they're a particular kind of learner, you do, as I think what you're implying is the idea of, having different ways of learning. So some people having notes alongside the video or the visuals or whatever to give different people different things to learn. But two things I like to do is I like to throw buzzwords in. Now, some people stay away from buzzwords because they think if you're teaching somebody, that sounds scary. But what I'll do is I'll describe the topic in plain English, and then I will throw a buzzword in and then not expand on it and say, and that is called X. And that's sort of like the hook for people who are self-learners, that they have a word to go and search and compound upon the ideas.
Yep.
And that's my sort of get out of jail free card, where I give them some way to sort of, if I'm not doing a good job explaining this, you know the word that I'm dancing around for you to go find. And if I'm lucky enough that I can have a 1v1, what I tend to do is I treat it more metaphorically. So I get a lot of people will make jokes about it in the various discords I'm in. I do a lot of I will describe things with metaphors all of the time, because there's nothing better than trying to pick something that's common ground. Like I'll describe complex programming concepts as like baking a cake or building a house, or because there's sort of an intuitive understanding about the relationship of things. Because the relationship is more important than the words. A lot of people get caught up with programming as, it's all these buzzwords, but it's not. It's like, do you understand the relationship between these two things? And if you can get that
relatable
concept,
series of events. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So combination of metaphors and leaving enough keywords that if I'm failing to educate, they're there for other people to hook onto.
Yeah. Your thing about buzzwords is it's funny. It's something that you're relating to that they can instantly go back to and say, okay, this buzzword means this. It's one of the core reasons why I tell people to put numbered bullet points in their game design docs, because when someone's looking at your doc, they can say, oh, section bullet point 1A or 1AA versus empty dot square. Like it's such a subtle thing, and people don't realize that like it's really easy for someone to reference your document when you can just give them a guide. So yeah, I can totally relate to that buzzwords thing. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, this is the whole thing as well. Like going down this rabbit hole that Jason has also covered is the concept of programming design patterns. It's a contentious point, because a lot of people think a design pattern is like a stamp of good code you can just slap into your project, but that's not what it's for. It's the exact opposite. It's what you're describing, which is we're trying to describe this like relationship of 10 things in the middle of a conversation about something else. We're building a health system. How do we talk about it? If you can just say, oh, we're going to use an observer pattern here, or when we're getting these objects, we're going to use a factory pattern. That's not telling you how you should code. That's telling you there is a named rough concept of how this architecture works that we can all intuitively just grab onto, and then we can figure out the details later. They're meant to be terminology to smooth those conversations. And so I often get frustrated when people ask, like, how do I apply X pattern to my project? It's like, no, you don't do that. You use it as you name the thing that you're doing with the pattern so you can describe it better. It's not about stamping them into your code.
Right. Sometimes it's I think sometimes when they're asking that it's more on how do I do like a standard implementation of that, so that it's very obvious what it is. Like if you're following a specific pattern, you may want to follow certain common naming and types of things. That I think is a useful one to kind of understand, like understanding like common naming around patterns, so that your pattern is very visible and obvious to everybody that's jumping into it.
True. Yeah.
But yeah, I think in general, like if you're just trying to shove a pattern in, you want to not do that. You want to be thinking about like, this actually fits to this pattern. You have a problem and you have these patterns that you've seen, and you've seen them as solutions, and they might fit in as the solution too.
But I usually, well, I agree with you. I usually shy away from teaching them for the one reason that a lot of patterns, if you try to apply them, you often don't really understand the problem they're solving, and so you're sort of hacking them in. If you forget about applying them from a pattern first perspective and just learn the problem, learn the solution, and then right at the end you go, and that's called a repository. You're like, oh, so that's what like the name should be. You have learned a concept.
Sure.
Now we're going to name it. Versus a lot of education is people will get a book, they'll read the words, and they'll say, in this situation I apply this. And I find that's if you lock it in your brain that this word equals this stamp of code, people have a hard time divorcing that from the fact that it is meant to be a solution to solve a problem.
Right. Yeah, my favorite thing on design patterns is still that Pluralsight library. It's like 18 hours of, I think, like 20 or 30 videos or little mini courses that are each a half hour. Yeah, and it's like the intro is like, here's the problem. Here's a possible solution with it. Here's a solution. Here are the problems with our solution. here's how we could implement this design pattern as a fix for it. Like it's like step by step of like, here was the reason that we actually did it, the reason that we had to change the code in the first place, that you're not just doing it pointlessly. At least that's how most of them were. It's, you know, it's a variety of them, but it's like a good like kind of overview to understand the names really quickly.
I have like 9 or 10 years of Pluralsight. I've just been I love it. I've just been using it forever. It's such a good resource.
It's good stuff. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I think we're gonna probably wrap up pretty soon. I know there are a couple more questions. There was one about should you take somebody that's apparently 16 and getting job offers, wanting to know if they should stick to their own projects or take the job works. I would try doing the job requests. I mean, if it's an opportunity there, like take it. That's the one thing you got to do. Like when opportunities pop up, just jump on them. Like, I mean, assuming that you think you can do it and you're willing to put in the effort to do it, just jump on it and do it. Like passing up on opportunities is almost never a good idea.
The 6 years of experience, I assume, is personal experience.
I would assume so. Yeah.
At 16, I mean,
it started coding early and ready to
learn.
Yeah.
I mean, at 16, jump on it. Getting into the industry and getting that experience that early. I mean, the Super Effects chip for the Super Nintendo was made by like I think a 19-year-old who reverse engineered the Game Boy to do 3D graphics, and that was huge for Nintendo. So yeah, like do it.
Just remember, you can always quit a job if you take the job and it ends up being terrible and it's keeping you from growing your career. You know, you can always quit and do it again. You can't always go back and retake a job that you passed on though, or an opportunity. So I'd say jump on the opportunities as they appear, if they seem good. And
it's one of those really frustrating things to say because a lot of people don't like to hear it, but there's other stuff to learn other than just the code. Until you've worked with people in a team, there's so much about personal boundaries and respecting other people's work and learning how to work in a team and how to communicate. And so even if it's just from the perspective of, and also different sizes, like the experience you'll have working with a 20-person team is different than the experience you'll have working with a 3-person team and the kinds of projects you'll work on. So any opportunity, take it. Like I can't vouch for everybody, but I've worked in like Japanese banks. I've working back-end for supermarkets. I've worked, I've done mobile apps, desktop apps, website apps, services. I've worked on Unity projects, and every single one of those gives you new and different stuff. And it's so valuable to be able to just pull from so many different resources that, like, any opportunity you can take it, you know?
Yeah, as a creative, new experiences are what drives you. I mean, and learning how to become a professional at 16, learning how to become a professional is just going to be great. But yeah, like it's going to inform so much stuff you do in your life. You know, you have to interact with other people. I mean, at least most of us do. So learning how to take in stimulus from other people's personalities and learning social cues, stuff like that, it's just going to be great for you.
And if I can give one bit of advice from personal failing, is it's going to be very easy to see yourself as new and younger and smarter and kind of all these great ideas. And you'll be coming into experience scenarios saying that's not done the right way and it's frustrating. And I probably spent the first few years of my creative career kind of being frustrated that everything seems outdated and wrong and they're not following the conventions and doing the stuff it should be done. And the truth is, maybe they know more than I do. Maybe there's some reason they're doing it the way they're doing it. And if you have a bit of empathy for the fact that they're not idiots, they've been doing this for X number of years, there's probably something to learn there. So try to learn with open mind that, like, you may have stuff to teach them, but there's a very good chance they have stuff to teach you, right? So try to be open-minded and not think that you're the smart one, that no one is listening or understanding your new modern techniques of doing stuff.
I've done that many times myself. Like, I don't know what the fuck's wrong with everybody. Yeah. Years later, realized like it was me.
Jason used to tell me that I was really bad and make fun of me all the time.
I still do. Yeah, I still do. Terrible at video games. Yeah.
Oh man.
I love running game ideas by Salim is the best, because it'll just go like my terrible game idea suddenly becomes something cool, like within 5 minutes. And some people, it's like 5 minutes in, I'm like, all right, I got to call you back because they had too much shit to do now. Like, just the scope of my game has quadrupled in the matter of 5 minutes of cool ideas and things that I never would have thought of.
No, he's giving me way too much credit.
But they're all terrible ideas. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, they're all bad, terrible ideas.
Jason's ideas are fine.
Well, then, you know what? I'll gift you. You can have the bullet tree. You can run with that.
Oh,
yours now.
Man, bullet tree is done. Like it's.
We didn't NDA that. Tree that shoots out bullets. I was thinking maybe I just put some turrets on the tree too. Just have them pop down. Some auto tracking turrets. I want to do one with the animation IKs, the new IK animator thing in Unity. So I think, I may just do some turrets attached to the tree that pop out, like branches that just aim at you. I have the branches just turn a little rocket launcher on there, may shoot out acorns.
I mean, if you've ever played a Suda 51 game, a bullet tree would fit right in any one of his games.
Wouldn't even be strange. It would be everyday stuff. Yeah.
Oh man.
Cool. Well, I guess we should probably just wrap it up here and meet back again next week. If everybody hits the like and subscribe and alert and stuff, then they'll get to see it next week. Might do more streams throughout the week. I've been doing a couple a week lately, so get some people in and hop in. But hopefully both of you guys are free on next Sunday. We can hop in some more and talk about more game dev stuff or design things and other shit, whatever comes up. So I guess just thanks everybody for coming out. I don't know, you guys have anything else you want to talk about or say before we end it and wrap up?
No, my first time. I had fun. Maybe I'll
if you liked having Salim here, make sure that you leave a comment and say that Salim has to come back so he doesn't try to like, everybody hated me last week, I don't want to come back.
I've already seen questions asking what your YouTube channel is, so you're the new person who has to set up his own.
I have been telling Salim to make a YouTube channel pretty much ever since I started one.
He's been on me about it for sure.
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe.
I think it would be great. Salim's great to talk to. All kinds of great insight on just the game industry, and he's played every video game ever made, so he can talk about every game and just working in the industry. All that fun stuff. I'm sure there's probably a game out there you haven't played. I don't know what it is yet.
Overwatch. I have not played Overwatch.
Oh.
Well, if you like footstep sounds, there you go. There's a treat for you. Like...
Yeah, now you realize how much you're missing out, right?
As weird as it is, it definitely like piques my interest because I don't think people think about footfalls much in video games. But,
I can see it. Salim's gonna tell me next week that he's playing Overwatch. Like, all I play is Overwatch now for footstep sounds.
Unfortunately, next week is going to be owned by Monster Hunter Rise on the Switch, which will keep me around for a long time.
And I'm currently playing Gunfire Reborn. That's my current game.
Nice. Good.
Yeah, it's like a roguelite dungeon crawlery thing where you get crazy weapons and you modify them as you go, and at the end of each couple of rooms you get an upgrade to like your abilities or your gun damage or whatever.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I think I remember seeing that. I'll have to check it out.
And because it's Unity and I can't help myself, I did take a little peek under the hood. I decompiled the code and had a look at what they're doing, and it looks it's cool.
Cool. Now, if we can just get Silk Song to come out next week, then I'd be happy.
Well, if you do that, none of us will be online for a few weeks, I think.
The other game that I've been looking forward to, sorry to extend it, but the other game I've been looking forward to that's been teased forever is the freaking Biomutant game. I don't know if you've seen that. It's like open world 3D with the Kung Fu raccoon. Like they've been teasing things forever. I think it's supposed to come out this year. It looks cool as hell. But I'm like, man, at this point, do I even care? Like, you guys, please give me the game for free now because I've been waiting for so long. But yeah, I don't know. Silk Song, I think it's supposed to drop in the summertime. I really hope. I want to play the game so bad.
I'm checking out this Biomutant trailer now.
But I mean, like, seriously, they've been teasing it for so long, and it looks really cool. Just like the combat and this different stuff you can do, like rolling around like a chi ball and doing some Katamari Damacy stuff. Like it looks cool as hell. But seriously, I think it's been teased for like 2 or 2.5 years. It reminds me of Prey and the years of coming out but not coming out.
Same with what is it? Duke Nukem Forever.
Oh God!
Just need to switch engines a couple times.
All right. But yeah, so that was it for me.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks again, guys, and thanks everybody for coming out, watching, and hanging out with us, asking questions. Make sure that you hit like, subscribe, share, or yeah, just before you leave, go copy the link and go share it on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. That'd be good. That's I think the best way to end it. And yeah, we'll see you again next week. Have a lot of fun. All right. Thanks again, everybody. I'm gonna find the button that says that I'm going away now and click on it.